Hey there, internet friends. Welcome to another episode of That Nerdy Site Show, weekly podcast where the team members from That Nerdy Site get together to talk about our lives and all of the nerdy things we love about them. I'm your host, Trevor Starkey, and joining me once again, Cameron Abbott. How you doing, Cam?
Hey, what's going on, everybody?
What's going on is today we are talking once again about Metaphor ReFantazio, but this will be most likely the last of the episodes because we've both finished the game now. I finished it back on Monday, and I'm like a good chunk of the way through a New Game Plus run. Cameron just finished it a couple hours ago, so we are going to be hot into a spoiler-free review, and then we'll go into kind of a full spoiler conversation on the game. So check out the time codes for all of that. If you like what you hear, please remember to like, subscribe, rate, review, share the podcast with your friends, all that fun stuff. So Cameron, hot off the heels of finishing this game, I've had a little bit of time to sit with it and kind of like let it percolate while I also continue playing through. I was almost done when we recorded last week's episode. I was basically going into like the very final stretch of the game. Where are you sitting with this one? How you feel about Metaphor ReFantazio? Spoiler free.
Spoiler free wise, I will say that this is a couple of things. Like I found out a couple of things in the last few hours after like just reading, because now I'm like, I can be spoiled now. So I was reading up on some stuff. To find out that this is using the same architecture and like same systems as the original Persona 5, finding out that like, oh, this is built like a PS3 game. Small areas that like are done that way, and like the way that they have kind of like taken this system and this I don't want to say software. I'm trying to think of like what the actual term is. The engine, there we go. The engine, the game engine. Taking this game engine and like really leaning into the artistic slant for it, rather than going big and bombastic with like bright graphics. It's just leaning really hard into the style. I think that it's a very different kind of stylish than like Persona 5 and Persona 3 Reload have been lately. Persona 3, 4, and 5 have had very unique, like very, very individual styles, and 5 especially was like one of the most stylish games of all time. Definitively, just like from everything from the UI to everything else. They kind of like Team Zero really said, hold my beer, and gave us a distinctly different, but equally, if not more, stylish game.
It's interesting. I mean, like none of the like, oh yeah, this is using the same engine as Persona 5. None of that surprised me. It has the same feel and same vibes of Persona 5 to it in terms of like level design, layout, all that kind of stuff. So I hadn't really done any digging into that, but that doesn't surprise me at all. On the style thing, while I agree this is very much a very stylish game, I think it's also a weirdly like anachronistic style game. Like it plays into the style and like what people love about the style of Persona 5 a lot. But when you throw that style and like, you know, the jazz splashy style from Persona 5 into like the medieval fantasy setting style here, it's like, oh, that's a weird butting of heads.
Oh, interesting.
That, it doesn't bother me or anything like that. But it was like it was the sense of, oh, this feels like a Persona, like they've gone out of their way to say this is not a Persona game, but it feels like it is in the Persona realm, not only because of gameplay, but because of like specific stylistic choices in regards to like, I guess probably mainly like menu design and like UI for the combat and stuff like that. It's not, it leans way more into like Persona modern style than like here's magic and fantasy and stuff like that style. Again, not like a bad thing or anything like that, but it jumped out at me as like this is an odd styling choice. I like the style of it just fine. In the same way, the upcoming game 33 Expedition kind of thing, like that, from what we've seen so far in trailers of that, fully leaning into Persona style styling of like, we're going to make the turn-based combat very much more bombastic and engaging compared to historically, stylized JRPGs. It's definitely doing what it can to set itself apart from a Final Fantasy or a Dragon Quest. In the same way that, like, I would say the Like a Dragon games are taking a very deliberate stylistic approach to how they do turn-based JRPG stuff in Like a Dragon and Infinite Wealth. But this very much feels like okay, well, it wasn't broken in Persona, so we're just going to kind of take that and carry it over and use that to our advantage and play on what people liked about the last thing. I just think it's an odd flavor, and we'll talk about this, I'm sure, when we discuss like music and stuff. I felt that way with a lot of the music choices too, whereas like
Interesting.
the music, I guess like the music doesn't stand out here as much as it does in Persona for me. Maybe because of those stylistic competing methodologies or something like that. But anyway, I'll throw it back to you.
Yeah. So I found it interesting. So when I think about Persona 5, I think of like jazz and like pop art and stuff like that. And I felt like very much it was Metaphor has much more of a style of like a watercolor or a I literally Googled it so I could pull it up and make reference to it, but like a Mille Fleurs, like Thousand Flowers sort of like tapestry and like oil painting era of like very, I would say I really think that what's interesting is I don't think its art style fits into a fantasy at all. I feel like it fits into like a historical, like when you look at like old like medieval paintings and stuff like that, when you look at that sort of a thing, especially in the menus, like a lot of the menus feel like a modern interpretation of that kind of style, which that's what I was like, I'm really blown away by the style of this game, that it does feel like it is a adjacent but distinctive away from the Persona style for me, especially with the typeset that it uses. Once again, I think like they get so detailed, the creators, and like also shout out to the creator, like with the director talking about it with IGN being like, I hate the fact that we do our menus the way that we do because they're a pain in the ass to make. Because the intrinsic, like very like detailed, not intrinsic, sorry, like the intricate, detailed, just down to like the lettering and font changes, like why like this font is used here like this, and then there's a different font that's used down here for this.
Sure.
And there's a very like that kind of like very intricate manner of detail is what I am pulling out of this, where I feel like a lot of Persona, there is a lot more of that like modern pop art with it, especially Persona 5, because they're leaning into the noir jazz feel of that game. I actually felt like the music was pretty distinct. I was really blown away by the soundtrack. I really enjoy it. I feel like it is, I mentioned it before, on a previous, like a week or two ago, where I talked about how like the music is very much like, it feels more like Fire Emblem and kind of like, very much more of like a fantasy opera, like operatic type of soundtrack, rather than kind of a like modern soundtrack that you get with the Persona games.
I will give you there were a couple beats in here, especially with the character of Juna, where I find myself thinking of the iconic Celeste Opera House from Final Fantasy VI. And, that's always a good comparison to pull, and always a great reference for me to draw from. So, it's not that I disliked the music.
Sure.
It's just that, like, aside from a few numbers, a lot of this was background noise for me.
Sure.
In the way compared to, like, knowing and being able to kind of, like, look back on and reflect back on specific dungeon themes in Persona 5, especially, sure. or obviously the some of the big, battle music themes and stuff like that. And there's also, I also played around in Metaphor here. I picked up the 35th anniversary Atlas nice. Pack DLC that basically does the thing that so many of these other games do, where it's like, okay, here's extra attire you can do to switch on and make all of your characters in the Persona 5, school outfit. And when you do that, it changes up the battle music to the Persona 5 music and the victory music to the Persona 5 victory music. And same with Persona 4 and Persona 3. So I played around with those a little bit, especially on this New Game Plus run. Just kind of let the Persona 5 one play out for the first few dungeons that I was doing, just because it was such a, I enjoyed that soundtrack more so than
I think
the
yeah.
modern. And then like the Persona 5 one was like a fun like nostalgia beat. Persona 3, even though I really only played Persona 3 for the first time last year, was already, oh, I've forgotten all of this. Like none of this has any kind of resonance for me
Yeah.
in the way that Persona 4 and Persona 5 do. So yeah, had some fun with that, playing around with that. And that I think that also feeds into some of like the stylistic choices in terms of like character design and stuff like that, because
Sure.
you see how easily the character designs map from like, here's how they look, or here's how
Yes.
your cast in Persona 5 looked, and here's how this cast looks if they're just in the school outfits. It's like, oh, yep, that's, there's
Same
there's
engine,
not-
same style, yeah.
Exactly. There's, like, they're all cel-shaded characters that, have that particular vibe going for them, and so there's not, like, apart from, a little bit of a different face and hairstyle, you can basically throw the outfits onto all of their builds and stuff like that.
For sure, yeah. Like you Nakamura, like Persona 4 protagonist Stroll, very very close in look and style. 100%. I think that also like speaks to like, because of course this is the same art team, this is the same, and I will also say to the composer being the same composer as the other ones, there is definitely some like B music, like background music that is like, if you told me, oh, that's actually the same one from a Persona game, I'd believe you, because it's very like, it's very their team, their composer style, but it is very much that.
I will call it out here. It's because I don't classify this as like a spoilery thing or anything like that. But later in the game, when you've got like the Gauntlet Runner, and you hop into the Gauntlet Runner, I would hear a chain sound effect, and it's like the exact same chain sound effect of death in the dungeons from Persona 5 and Persona 4.
Yeah.
And it still triggers me when I would just hear that sound effect, and you hear it like just ambiance chains dangling in the Gauntlet Runner anytime you like jump into the Gauntlet Runner later in the game and stuff. And so it's like, I was like, why am I always hearing the death chains? What's going on here? And so yeah, it was that was the like funniest beat for me in terms of like sound design or sound effect carryover, was that since there isn't really that same kind of like, oh, if you're in a dungeon for a long time, death is going to come after you. Like this game doesn't really play with that idea. It's not diving into that Persona element that you get from those games. But you can still hear his death chains rattling. So yeah, a little PTSD
for sure.
That.
Yeah. There's something that I really love about this game, and I think a lot of it is also kind of like the broader themes. Like they really are touching on like the Persona 3, 4, and 5 are based off of like societal things and like things that are happening in the real world. Like Persona 3's big theme is like depression and grief and like tragedy and like recovering from tragedy. Persona 4 is very much about what it means to be kind of isolated and alone and like not being true to yourself. And Persona 5 is about what happens when like life and society is stacked up against you. Like when the house is rigged against you, or the game's rigged against you by the house. It like they very much fit into that. And this one, it very much takes a lot more, I think, like grander themes. And I think it lands them like relatively well almost all the time. But at the same time, because these are bigger concepts, we don't dive deep into them as much. It's broader, less specific. And so I feel like if people are like, well, I felt like more of an impact from the story of like Persona 5, especially like, young millennials coming up and like the empty, vapid promises of society, and like dealing with the frustration of that, like the idea of like rebelling and taking it to society, like that resonates with people. The idea of like being alone and like being alone, and then what it means to like build a community, build a group of people around, and then having to say goodbye with Persona 4. Like there are so many things that like the Persona games do that I think is a much more personalized story, that I look at this one and I think to myself, that Metaphor is definitely handling like much more abstract concepts.
Yeah, it hits on a lot of big grand ideas at a, broad surface level, like width and breadth, but doesn't go as deep as I like in a lot of the other Persona stuff. Save like a couple, like you get some like as is often the case, you'll get like some of the follower links or the companion links and stuff like that, and their stories will tell usually a good, heartfelt, emotional narrative over the course of their handful of scenes, but even those are like hit or miss in terms of like how they tie into the grander themes of the game and stuff like that. And yeah, I found myself definitely not being as emotionally invested as I have been with Persona Cast in the past, but I was probably more cerebrally invested in this one, in the story and the ideas and the topics that, the election and the society, the politics, quite literally of this game, and the kind of story that you see playing out with like, the church dominating over everything, and how the structures and how the systems have embedded themselves into the day-to-day life to keep their hold over the people and the populace and stuff like that. And we obviously it's getting a lot of attention because it's coming out right, at the election cycle here, but like it's an evergreen thing. This is it just happens to be, well, it's on extra everybody's mind. Instead, like if this had come out 2 years ago, it would have been just as relevant.
100%.
To the politics of the world.
I think that's a good successor to Persona 5. Persona 5 is about what happens when you become aware of society's injustices, but it takes a very I'm going to use the term because they are juvenile, like they are juveniles. It takes a very juvenile young person look and approach to it. Like, well, I get superpowers and I invade their hearts and I do this stuff, and like that's a very like youthful idea. This one is, I get involved in politics, I do the grassroots work, and I build a following, and I eventually, I try to make incremental small changes as a platform policies. And it's like, as a almost 35-year-old man, that resonates with me on a very deep level of like, this is actually how you make change. One thing I will say that they touch on also is like racism is right up front and center. Your main character is part of the race of people who the church literally says are shit and are no good and shouldn't be given rights or respect. The most heavy-handed institutionalized racism you could address in this, given to you right with your character. And I think that what they do they do not gloss over or fairy tale the racism in this. People get along and it goes away, and they deal with the fact these are embedded, institutionalized problems, and they're not going to go away overnight. These are things we're going to have to continue to work on, and that's up front at the very beginning of the story is there's a whole lot, but also it talks a lot about idealism and naivete and what does it mean to lose your way as you get older, and what does it mean to and what does it mean to when trauma happens to a person who is an idealist leader, what's the reaction, what happens to them? And that's a much later game thing that you find out about. But yeah, overall, my kind of review on this for me is a 10 out of 10, that phenomenal game. I think this is, I put it completely up there, equal with the best of the Persona series. I think that it fits more into the kind of and it's funny because this is the team that took over for the development team or the developers who worked on Persona 1 and 2. Both Persona 2s. They took over and made Persona 3 from that team. This is kind of things that they're dealing with and the kind of things they approach in this game feel very at home with Persona 1 and Persona 2 and 2.5. It fits into kind of these much more broader, greater, not greater, but more nebulous narratives about what I'm not going to get too in the weeds on this, but it fits into a much more adult story than the kind of like I mentioned earlier, youthful juvenile version of or not juvenile version, but a juvenile approach to the problems of society.
I do think, on a grand storytelling perspective, by stepping away from the Persona framing and all of our main cast of characters are high schoolers or something like that, it definitely allows for a wider variety of characters and a wider breadth, and that is inevitably going to open up additional storytelling avenues. And sure, you get some of those kinds of like older, more older viewpoints in some of the social links and stuff in those other games, or even younger ones. But I do I appreciate that this, among your own party, you get a very deliberate choice in terms of like a wide swath of characters from kind of every creed. I mean, very literally every creed in this game.
By the end, you have every single race in your party. It's great.
Yeah. I'm also in here with a 10. I do believe also a phenomenal game. I don't have it. I mean, I talked last week in terms of like, on any given day, maybe this or Final Fantasy VII Rebirth or Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth are kind of like circling, the top spots. I think ultimately just because I have a little bit more like personal interest in some of those other stories, this ends up kind of being the bottom of those three. But it's still, a top 5 game for me easily for this year, unless something else kind of comes, or a couple other things come in and like knock it out of the rankings there. But yeah, it is like I'm also, counting each of those other games as like 10 out of 10s for this year in terms of like and it's also fascinating again because all of those are more or less turn-based. Certainly less so for Rebirth, I guess, because of how they've restructured the combat in there. But even the combat in there is somewhat turn-based. But yeah, especially Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth. And I love that like all three of them are doing the turn-based, big bombastic JRPG spectacle with their own flavors and with their own different approaches. And all three of them are, nobody's like stepping on each other's toes in terms of that. Nobody's trying to like steal anybody else's thunder. They're just all three really great games executing at the top of their level. So, 10 out of 10s from both of us. So definitely check this out if you haven't already. And if you're still on the fence, go download the prologue. You can play the first 10 hours-ish of the game for free if you want and base it from that. Because from that 10 hours, you're going to get a good sense of how do I like this game? How does it play out? You're going to get more and more of the story, of course, over the course of took me, I want to say 85-ish hours. No, a little over 80 hours, 83, 84 hours to finish the game playing on easy mode. I imagine it's going to take a little bit more playing on a higher difficulty because you might need to grind a little bit more or something.
I clocked in somewhere around 98 hours.
Okay.
Granted, like I did go out of my way to like grind out, just like especially towards the end of the game. I wanted to. I have almost all my archetypes fully leveled up for my main character, so
sure.
Yeah.
Go check out this game, and if you've already checked out this game and want to hear some of our spoiler thoughts on it, feel free to stick around. If you haven't, but you want to check out our spoiler thoughts when you do finish it, mark down this episode and time code, and feel free to come back when the time is right. So last chance to duck away before diving into spoilers in 3, 2, 1. Full spoiler stuff now. Cam, what do you want to chat first, spoiler-wise? Do you want to talk about like the big twist of the kind of narrative?
No, we should totally talk about the big twist. Well, okay. There's a couple big twists.
Yeah.
So, are you talking about like main character big twist?
Yeah, I'd say main character big twist. Yeah.
Absolutely.
We'll dive in. First things first. Obviously, the late game discovery that I have just come upon in my New Game Plus run again, where your Elda character from the jump turns out has been like the consciousness of the prince all along, and you basically like merge back into become the prince for the end game after like coincidentally having decided that was going to be your gambit, for the last 10, 15 hours in the competition of the grander story in the first place was, well, the people in the know that the prince was an Elda, and nobody's seen him in years, so sure, we can pass off that you're the Elda, or that you were the Elda
and
prince.
And you grew up with him, so you know stuff that only he would know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And hey, turns out you didn't actually grow up with him. You were created from Magla after he got put into his little magic coma, but you're basically him. So yeah.
The thing I love about it though is they're not just like, oh yeah, it's like a magical bullshit thing. It's over the time he was sick. And if you ever like work with kids who have like chronic illness, who are like for whatever reason, can't be out there running around with other kids. Their biggest dream is to be out there with other kids and like running around doing stuff. And it's from the very short, brief moment we get where it's kind of like they introduce the concept with the reveal, is the prince is like, you are the idealized version of the prince.
Yeah, you're effectively playing through it on the New Game Plus. I like that the game is basically starting with you just pretty much at the beginning of that version's journey. You're on this journey into the city with Gallica, just after Gallica has been given this mission to go find Grius. So like you've basically played this character's entire lifespan, apart from the little bit of coming to in the forest that would have given away the game or something like that. But we do get like the flashback anime sequence of the young version of your character playing with the young version of the prince, and the realization, in hindsight, that that's kind of like a little bit more like imaginary friend, vibes, and you are the imaginary friend manifested. Was, I think, that's like an interesting extra dynamic that you see in hindsight, or see on a second playthrough.
You are fulfilling his dream, which is his dream was to go out and see the world, and couldn't because of his curse. And so you are like the way that they handle that, because when they first introduced it, I was like, I don't know how I feel about it. But then that cutscene happens, and I'm like, first off, heartbroken. This poor child has just been like, basically, like, for all intents and purposes, bedridden his entire life, or last 10 years.
He was hidden away because he's a disgrace to the big church. And then I did appreciate, I guess the other related twist that we get is the revelation that Moore is the embodiment of the king. So you've been basically talking to your dad the entire game.
Yep. And then your dad is like, I'm going to take a bad guy turn, and it turns out like I'm actually your father, and it's like, okay, and then it's like, I just want to protect you because that's all I can. Like the whole reveal of like, I realize my memories now, and also it's an amazing touch because it's like, they introduce us to Moore without us knowing that Moore is literally the same thing as us the entire game, and neither of us know it.
Yeah.
And so it's like, they set it up at the very beginning. They give that that hint throughout it.
And they give us the little, like, in that like penultimate final dungeon kind of thing, where you're in the flying palace. You get those like magla memories of the king basically like realizing how his hands are tied and how he has no control over his country because of how the church has taken over so many things, including killing the village of his lost love or whatever, and the loss of his ideals kind of playing into that theme, and his son is a chance for those ideals to be like realized and revitalized. And it also, but as a result, it is like, the prince, like the fact that apart from your consciousness version of the prince that's running around over the course of this game, the prince has been basically in a bed coma with this curse for many, many years, wakes up, and then is like within a couple days dead again. Yep. Or just dead, outright dead, and like, your body and spirit become one. But that, iteration that sat there for years is just no more. It's like, what a sad life that guy led. that kid led. But yeah.
But I think it's beautiful because it's like it's the realization of his ideals manifested and gone out into the world, proving them, and then coming back and like reclaiming identity and title. And it's like, when we talk about these broader story beats that we mentioned earlier in the spoiler-free portion, this is one of the things we're talking about, is like, you are talking about bigger ideas of what it means to have an identity. And also for there to be like a grand conspiracy. Because if you go back to that initial cutscene when they're both, quote unquote, both kids, neither have horns.
Yep. And
it is a straight up like, and my thought was like, maybe the horns grow in later. And then you see little kids running around and they already got full horns. And it's like, I didn't realize that at the beginning, because it's not really pointed out to you.
Yeah.
And it's like, that is so goddamn smart. Like they layer this so that it's not like, that's a turn, like the turn, that's bullshit or whatever. It's done so well there.
And it is like, because you obviously see the prince sleeping every day before the day begins or whatever, and the age of a new king draws near. But the way the hair's laid out, yeah, maybe the hair is masking horns, and we're just not seeing horns on this character. Tied into that, going back to like the party makeup and the fact that like your party is bits from every culture, every tribe. Especially if you include Grius, who is your rogue character, RHOAG, which I believe are like the long-lived ones.
Yes, they are.
I love that, like, you get the first pairing of your character and Elda, the most, I guess I'm still of the mindset that the people look down on the Parapets a little bit more than the Elda, but maybe that's just because they don't see enough Elda to really look down on them, and you're the only one they ever interact with.
That is, by the way, that is a very real, like when you're talking about race relations.
Yeah,
this is crazy. This game pulled so many memories from my interracial relations class that I took in college. Of like, there's the minority that is the most prevalent, that gets the most hate, the actual most hate, even though institutionally they may not be the one that has the most prejudice put against them. A great example of that is Hispanics in Arizona. Systemically and by the structure of government and the systems of governance, African Americans will be more likely, will face more persecution. But because of the prevalence of Hispanics in Arizona, Hispanics from the anecdotal perspective, seem to be the more put down on.
Sure.
And so it's very much like there's tons of examples of that throughout different race countries and national racial makeups, but this is 100% a prime example of that.
Yeah. So with that, I love that you are the most put upon tribe, and immediately your first real ally is the most exalted tribe, a Clamar, a not disgraced, but like a noble who's kind of lost his noble house in Stroll. And so I love that immediate like insight into his character of like, he doesn't care, about that. He's not focused on that. He wants to help, and he also really, really wants revenge against Luis.
Also shout out to, I thought when I started the game, I was like, oh, the Clamar are going to be like ram people. And it's like, oh no, they're dragons. Like those are straight up like dragon horns. Because Luis's ones are like especially draconic. And I'm like, that makes sense. They're on top.
Yeah.
Because they're dragons. They rule. That makes sense.
His fake dragon horns.
His fake dragon horns.
Has another fun twist that we get late in the game when he basically discards those. And I appreciated that there is a moment where the characters find those horns. In that thing and put two and two together and realize, oh, he must be an Elda too.
Also shout out to, and this goes back to when we mentioned about Moore and the protagonist, and also Luis, because Luis is an Elda. But the thing about it is he was an Elda who was influenced by the king, by Moore.
Yeah.
And his book, he was inspired by the same book that drives the protagonist. And it's two, and it goes back to when they talk about at the beginning. Moore tells you the reason why the hero kings failed is because they were always on their own. And it's very clear in this perspective that Luis is a hero king. He's the villain of the story, but he is, for all intents and purposes, a quote unquote hero king.
Yeah.
But he's alone. And that's why he failed. When they nail it on this game, man, they just nail it. It's so good.
Even when he's not alone, like he has Zorba as a sycophant, but he doesn't basically put any true power into Zorba. He just kind of uses the people around him rather than actually aligns himself with them.
His ideals and his and the actions he follows through on are in contrast to each other. And it's not necessarily that it's hypocritical. It's that he clearly still believes in his ideals, but he believes the actions to accomplish those ideals, unfortunately, they are counterproductive to what his actual ideals are. Like, that's one of the things that makes Luis such an interesting villain, is because there are more quote unquote evil people in the story than Luis.
Yeah.
At one point, he is your goal because you think that there's the machinations of he was the assassin, he's the curse holder. Shout out to the Rella reveal later on. Like, holy shit.
I mean, like Forden and like the secret church cabal are easily worse people all around.
The Senate, the prince, the two princes of the two principalities, the head of like the weapons arm manufacturer faction, and then the head of the army.
Yeah.
Who are just like all the worst.
Yeah. I mean, Forden is easily, I think, the like most traditional, like, oh, you're just straight up not a good guy, and you are only doing this to to exercise your own power and stuff. And that's like so many times this game asks you like, what do you think a ruler needs or something like that, and like I just did one where it's like power, intellect, other, or like some other option. I was like, I don't want to select the power because that's what you're going for, Luis, and that's what Forden wanted, and so I always avoid that particular choice.
Yeah.
Because I don't think that's the most beneficial thing for a ruler to have in this sort of society.
You know, I think that it's really a really interesting look at that. Forden, especially because Forden comes off as like, Luis is definitely the bad guy, and Forden's like a potential, like he's an adversary, but he's not necessarily a bad guy. And then slowly they do this dance where they turn and flip, like they flip positions, and it's just the wildest shit.
And so much of it is solely for the player's benefit. I think there is this game goes out of its way to talk to the player a lot. Obviously, from the very jump, it's asking you for the player's name rather than the protagonist's name. And we'll name the protagonist later. And
shout out to the True Seekers.
We are the True Seeker. Yeah, all that stuff.
Let's go.
But yeah, we also have the benefit of seeing so many scenes that our characters are completely out of the loop on, and it is just for the benefit of us. Obviously, we also have the context of the old world and how like much it mirrors our world, and the idea of humans and what like the reveal that like the Elda are like, oh, it's taken from the word elder, basically. But because the word human got this such nasty connotation, we've renamed ourselves Elda instead to distance ourselves from the humans, but effectively Elda are the humans of old.
And either we are the tribes out there are either evolutions of humans, or they are pre-evolutionary like experiments done to wage war.
Yeah.
Clearly the the Resant come to mind because they're genetically, physically like commandos. Basically, all of them are like super strong. You have the Ujif, which are like clearly meant for like espionage, clearly they took these, like they created these two things, and then you have evolution ones like the I forgot their names. They're the gnomes, like Juna and Alonso's people.
Oh, I know what you're talking about.
The Nephili, I'm trying to remember what they are.
I'll see if I can pull it up here
cool.
real quick.
They're definitely like an evolution because
the Nydia.
The Nydia, yeah. They could be an evolution. They could also be about like espionage. Like we don't know. I love that the Nydia are like this. They remind me a lot of the Zora in Mass Effect, where once you put on that thing, like you never take it off. Like even among your own family, when you put on your glamour, you keep that forever.
It's the. I mean, in part because of the use of glamour. They reminded me very specifically of Worlds Beyond Number, because Ursulon is always wearing his human
That's true,
glamour.
yeah.
So I am also immediately like associating them with like the Fey realm and like fantastical creatures that have this as their defense mechanism / disguise to fit in with, the normal world or something like that.
Well, I also appreciate that they're like, well, we have to do this because otherwise nobody's going to take us seriously.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I'm like, that's a great. Yeah, because shout out to like a point about they mentioned it, bringing up like Worlds Beyond Number Dimension 20 stuff, the model minority myth, which is like if the like halflings are like innocent, like there's all that idea of like about a like or like we could use a real life world comparison of little people.
Yeah,
people not taking little people's issues seriously.
And there's also the like because they have this glamour and because it's a known thing that they have a glamour, there's also this inherent distrust of
Yes.
like, you're never showing us the real you, so how can I trust what you're telling me?
Yep.
And like that, I love how that comes up in Juna's story and some of the other stories around those characters. It's I think what plays into Alonso being a con man is like he is inherently a con man from his very nature, and he is just turned that into a profession as well, I would say.
And it also goes into this like his dual nature of being a doting son versus being a con man, right? Like it plays directly into that. And it's such a great job of dealing with it. But I think like going back to the original point of like the original twist of the Elda and kind of like the greater story, shout out to Shinjuku just being like, this is Japan. Like this is 100% a futuristic Japan. That has been like ravaged by magic warfare, and also found it very interesting, like the entire idea of like Magla and it being like more like a natural resource that's in the world and that's populating the world. The idea that it can be like it can be pure or it can be like contaminated with anxiety. Like, man, they threw around anxiety so much in this game. It's wild.
Yeah.
And I'm like, they're like, oh no, they have anxiety. I'm like, you missed your hit and now you're having a panic attack. It's like, I feel seen. Sure. I don't know if you're calling me out or you're telling me like I feel seen. One of the two. It can go either way. Like I'm like, oh, like you whiffed it. You moved it real bad. Now you think everybody's looking at you for whiffing it. Yes, been there 100%. I feel that. I felt that. I felt seen. Yeah. Shout out to like also like talking about like mental health. Mental health is the forefront of this game when it comes to like its themes. It's all about mental health. The humans are all based off of like specific like issues that people have. Mm-hmm. One of which is like, one of them is just a straight up a giant baby head with baby legs.
Yep.
Looks like something out of fucking Sid's toy collection.
Whole bunch of postpartum trauma in that.
Yep.
In that chunk.
Yeah, there's a whole lot going on there. Also shout out to like some of the most like serious storytelling about grief. One section where they're like, "Hey, you guys want to see some like adult storytelling about like grief? Here's some." And it's like every moment we kept going further and further into the story, whether it was what do I call him? Heimlich. Heisme, and the Sanctoris, and like the like trauma Olympics that they have you go through as you're like dealing with all of that. And then shout out to all of a sudden like the big reveal being like, oh, Heisme doesn't like parapuses. And he's like, it's like, I shouldn't be racist against them, but I am. Mm-hmm. And it's like,
I like that they have their Legolas Gimli moment in the end sequence of like, I thought you didn't like parapuses. I like you, my boy, or whatever it is. Like that nice little like, yeah, you probably can't teach this old man completely to change his ways, but he can, much like we see in so much of modern society, like the personal relationship trumps the like societal like thoughts.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's why so many people are so eager to jump in and be like, but I have a black friend. It's like, all right, settle down. You're not completely getting the point, but good for you for having a black friend.
Well, and it should be noted that Heisme, like when we get into the different characters, Heisme, there's Heisme probably originally didn't feel this way about parapuses.
I mean, just like that is the nature of
prejudice.
So much prejudice is like it stems from like experiences, either personal or societally experiential or something like that. It's stereotypes and all that stuff. It's like it's either coming from something rooted in your past or something that like you were told in your past that is rooted in somebody else's past, and all that. And
it's like re-emphasized by society.
Yeah.
The reason why stereotypes are bad is because
it's why I always ascribe to the Avenue Q, like everyone is a little bit racist. You're never going to not be racist just because like it is a way that your mind is categorizing things. Like that's always going to happen, especially in a very visual medium or something like that. You're always going to innately and like, at the in a microsecond link certain thoughts based on immediate first impressions of a person, based on what you've seen in media about that. And it's always a matter of, okay, just because you're racist, like it's you can be racist. Don't like act on it. Don't turn it into prejudice. Don't like evaluate that racism. Evaluate that initial response and say, is this right, or is this based on something that has nothing to do with this person, and I need to get past that hurdle.
Yeah, we talked about this. Funny enough, on that D Plus show last week when we talked about the Romani, like the Romani representation in one of those episodes being like very not cool.
Yep.
And I brought up the fact that growing up, I was brought up unintentionally, like it was never like something that was outright taught to me, but due to social cues and other things, I grew up racist against Romanis, and I grew up racist against Turks, like Turkish people. And it's like, well, why? It's like, well, it's a lot of social aspects, social cues of not outright hatred, but just like for example, especially with the Romani one, my mom not wanting to be associated with being Romani whatsoever. I'd never met a Romani person in my life for like the vast majority of my life, but there is something inherently growing up of like terms being used, like using the term like I've been gypped. That's directly tied into it, and it's a matter of fact, and it's something that as a 29-year-old man, I needed to sit back and evaluate it because somebody's being like, hey, you're being racist. And me being like, no, I'm not. And they're like, and everybody be like, no, you're being racist, and having to take a step back and evaluate. That's what you do. When you are confronted with your own racism, do not throw up the walls. Do not try to block it. Take a step back and reevaluate yourself on it. Yeah. And if you were like, I'm just trying to be edgy and dumb with my humor, admit to that. And then then realize
that, hey, okay, people might respond to that in ways that you are not going to want or expect.
Or you thought, oh, I'm being funny, and it's like, no, you're just being racist.
Yeah, no, you're just being an ass.
You're just being an asshole and racist. Immediately, that's a moment of like, have some reflection, take stock of yourself, and see if like you need to make a deep internalized change.
Yeah.
I did that. It's something that I think everybody should, like you said, everybody's a little bit racist. When you meet those moments, don't you be like, oh, well, take those and build off of it and change. And that's something we see with Heisme, when it comes to, especially dealing with Del and Vasilio. Like, it is like, this is very much that, especially when he finds out that his understanding of the circumstances weren't accurate.
Yeah.
And he has to reevaluate himself off of that.
Yeah.
And it doesn't happen immediately, which is great because these things don't happen overnight. They take time.
Yeah. In that, we can maybe segue over into characters, follower links, all that stuff, and the stories of the characters in particular. Any that in particular stand out to you? Is the Heisme one like a highlight, a standout?
Oh, 100%.
Dealing with the grief of his lost son.
Yeah, dealing with a dead son. I'm like, it's like, oh, that's horrifying. And then finding out it's like happened during a Parapus riot. I'm like, okay, Parapus riots are a thing. Okay, and then being like, finding out later, it's like, oh, Parapus riots was a cover for the like protest and riot that happened over like unethical igniter experimentation on Parapuses.
Yeah.
And it has me being like, oh, like my son died because of the church. But also Heisme being like he's built up to be like a ninja or like an assassin or like a shadow operative, but finding out like he was stuck doing that because of his race.
Yeah.
Bullshit. Like, and it's just like, oh, he's like, you learn when your follower link with him as you grow, this man has so much wisdom to teach you. And this guy should be teaching other younger, like the kind of father, like I didn't expect to get a bat dad out of this game. I didn't expect to all of a sudden find a surrogate father in the form of a little bat guy, but I did. And it's like, it's one of the strengths of this game is that they give you that. And it's about coming to terms with grief, coming to terms with also like, I broke the mold. I left the village. I went my own way. How do I reconcile myself with my culture when I haven't been a part of my culture for many years? Like I left my culture behind, like, and it also comes up with like the idea of like code switching. A lot of people who are Trevor and I are both white, obviously. Sorry, audio listeners, if you thought that wasn't the case. I know you've been listening to us for 5 years and all of a sudden you're like, what? They're not, they're white. Shucks. Sorry, folks. That aside, like code switching is a very real thing that people, especially minorities, have to do because how you act. And a great like the best like version media example I can think of is sorry to bother you, I think is what it's called.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The sketch comedy show.
No,
sorry
movie.
to bother you. Yeah, sorry to bother you. The telemarketer, like, put on your black voice
or put on your white voice because you're on the phone with people.
Yeah, put on your white voice.
Yep,
Yeah.
That's code switching. That's what it is. And so Heismay dealing with like code switching and not like, and also shout out to them all, like each race having a different like accent. Thought that was very cool. The Ujif have a very like Eastern European accent because blah 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 vampires, bats, and stuff. You have the Rosant. A lot of the Rosant, especially if they're from that particular area, have a like sort of like German accent to them. And then everybody else is just different varieties of British.
Or different UK.
Different UK.
Like,
Sorry,
yeah,
thank you.
Because you have
some Scottish with
Scottish in there,
yeah.
Irish.
Irish, yep.
Yeah.
Yep. You definitely get a lot of
and then Elda are English.
Yep.
Like, yeah, your character and Luis are like, Luis is putting on a little bit of a heightened thing because he's doing the whole thing of pretending to be Clamar.
It's like American English for Elda.
Yeah.
Elda's straight up American English, and Luis is 100% code switching to come off as a Clamar, which is like, dude, I'm telling you, when they nail it in this game, they nail it so good. Heismay just like being like having to deal with like the cultural differences and like then making a decision that is like, I'm not going to do my cultural thing. I'm going to do something for myself. Because I'm not ready to give up my son yet. I'm going to carry him with me. Shout out to that. Also, boo the people who stole his son's bones and ashes. That was literally the worst.
Yeah, that's like, the fuck is wrong with you people?
But also, shout out to him bonding with the Saint Taurus and helping her break out of the what is it? It's not melancholy. It's melancholia. The melancholia like stupor she was in from the human being around.
Yeah.
And like the corrupted Malga and everything like that. Like her getting brought out of it by a like sympathetic grieving father to match and Saint Taurus. That whole thing is her whole story is like.
Yeah. That I thought was.
You didn't think it was done as well?
No. I think that is like one of the few places that the game does a great job of like introducing the theme of a character alongside the theme of that character's dungeon, a la like the Persona 5 stuff. Like Persona 5, each dungeon being so on theme with the person whose heart you're stealing and stuff was like they do it like all of those are very personally related to your characters. Whereas in this, they don't do as great a job as those. I think like Yufa, because you are saving her from her, her dungeon is her trial as the priestess kind of thing. There's both you are learning the history and Yufa's learning the real history of the island and her people in that. But yeah, the trauma bonding, for a lack of any kind of good term on that, between Heismay and Joanna is a great like parallel that we get between those two.
Dude, when we find out what happened to her baby, it's straight up like that's evil.
Yeah,
that is evil, and it's just
and it ties in ultimately to what happened to you, the prince.
Yeah.
Effectively, like you are deemed immediately as a lesser person because you are a mixed race child. We see it with Maria throughout the game, and the like burdens that are put on her for something she had no control over.
Yep. It's straight up just like so like and she'd even keep her lover was exiled from the town by her family. And it's like, well, what happened to her family? It's like, oh, they got eaten by the human baby. Okay. Yeah. I'm all right with that.
Yeah, that's fine.
That's fine. You took other like you did bad later.
Yeah,
but up to this point, I was okay.
If you would just fuck the people who wronged you, okay, bad. You're going to Arkham Asylum. Yeah. But yeah, the fact that you also took innocent people that had nothing to do with your trauma. You took children. You just repeated the cycle. I love that, like, immediately it kills Morris, the guard that you've kind of been hunting down there, and she immediately, like, sacrifices Morris because, you didn't find, like, proper food for it? All right, you're the food now. which is inevitably like what was going to happen. What was he thinking? His hubris thought he was going to, survive it or whatever.
There's a meme on TikTok called "I can't believe the leopards ate my face."
Sure. Yeah.
Which is just directly that. It's like, oh my gosh, I can't believe by hanging out with all these hungry leopards that the leopards decided to eat my face.
Yeah.
Nailed it perfectly. Also, her turn on it being from like I will, like, I'm using my own money. I'm good. Like, I promise I will support you in your bid for being king if you help my people. All this stuff to just be in a turn of like,
now you know the truth. I need to kill you.
My baby's going to eat you now.
Yeah.
Baby, eat them.
Yeah.
And it's like,
that was a fun one in New Game Plus to just kill in one turn.
Nice. Very nice.
Yeah. Admittedly, in like the first playthrough, it was only a few turns probably for me too. But yeah, I think that is one of the best like story beats of the game is that chunk, and then going into like, all right, like
the exhibition.
She was the head that you're putting on offer, and the idea starting with we're gonna go get this Heisme person and kind of use up we're not going to go after the biggest baddest creature, but we're going to go after like one that's actually impacting people's lives and bring that to justice and kind of treat it like that. I appreciate that. Then it segues into Joanna and the added benefit of that being Joanna being a higher up in the church, and so it immediately puts like a stain on the church, and the church immediately goes in to kill it themselves so that it doesn't stretch out, draw any further attention to it. They just, all right,
Forden is
all
savvy.
of these people, and yes, like Forden, absolutely, that's where we start to see like, oh, he's not a great guy. He is doing this purely like manipulating. I mean, I guess we get that initially in like, oh, the church is going to hijack this dictum from the king and turn it into a competition where it's weighed heavily in the church's favor.
100%,
and
yeah.
Like, because they're setting the rules, of course, it's
Great.
going to be like.
Granted, initially it's like, well, Forden is not the assassin of the king.
Yeah.
He's not Louis. He's not Louis. And so it's like, well, maybe Forden won't be so bad. And then it's like, oh no, that's right, I forgot. Theocracies are a terrible form of government.
Yeah.
Like awful. And then as you find out more and more and more, you're like, man, they, like I mentioned, the dancing and turning they do with Luis and Forden and their position in your as enemies in your narrative, the switching that they do, but at the same time never absolving either side of it, what they've done.
Yeah.
To the point where Luis outright to Stroll says, yes, I let your parents die and your town burn because I need people to understand the danger of humans.
Yeah.
And then that follows up with like, oh, but you've been using humans. You've been manipulating humans. You've been
creating humans.
You've been creating humans. You unleashed a human on that village. Like,
yeah. I love the crier. He's like an unsung hero.
Shout out to him.
Like,
sad he's not
Baldwin or something like
Baldwin.
that.
Yeah, it's sad he's not a follower Link.
Yeah,
because you would think he would be with how often and like how tight he gets with you at the end.
Yeah,
but I think at the same time it's okay that it's not, because his is tied mostly to the actual narrative.
Yeah,
I don't think it fits with a follower.
And I think the struggle with that would be like, oh, like he would be another Gallico one where it's like you're only leveling up his stuff in certain story beats of the game, and it's like, well, we don't need another one of those.
That's true.
But I do appreciate that, like, he kind of immediately starts to see the cracks and immediately sees like and keeps an eye on you and your party.
He picks up real quick. There's something different about you.
Yeah.
Because you fuck up a church official.
Yeah. and I love him, like, and those scenes we get of him kind of trying to make the case to the people, like, how is it that Luis always knows where the humans are, huh? Like I know it's not a conspiracy if I'm right. Is kind of the vibe of it. He
is very much like the crier, or like it's very his role is very Shakespearean.
Yeah.
Of the conscious,
he's
authors.
absolutely the like act 1, act 2. Like, I'm gonna come out, do my little prologue here. I'm the narrator, and then now we're going to see, what happens. Absolutely, It's great.
He's great with that. But I think, and also the great thing about him is he reveals that they're like, you're a church crier. Why did you come here? Why did you follow us? Why are you interested in us? And he goes, well, listen, I'm a church crier. Yeah. And my dad was a church crier before me. It's a hereditary position. And And he goes, my dad is, he goes, I kind of have always had a slant against the church. I stay on their good side, but ever since they disgraced my dad, because my dad realized there was something like, that's what they reveal about the Parapus riots, the truth of it being because of the igniter experiments the church was doing.
Yeah.
And then my dad was trying to call out the church members who were a part of it. And he got lambasted by it and ended up killing them. And he goes, so I kind of have I'm not always good with the church. And he goes, I stay in their good graces, but I tend to kind of like go against the grain.
I'm going to subvert them how I can.
Yeah. Which is very much like he was kind of in his own melancholia of, I'm part of the system. And this is how, and he's a great example of how somebody who has a position of power can then use it to help out people who do not have power. Him realizing that he can do something to help your party and help you win the throne is a big turning point for his character arc, and ends up leading to basically the coalition that you get at the end with the other Senate members. Because he basically says, like, listen, Luis is going to murder us all, or you can back the Elda candidate. Yeah. And like, tough titties, this is what it is. And just shout out to him. Shout out to the Senate people being like, yeah, like very, very Waldorf, and what's the other one?
Stadler and Waldorf.
Yeah, Stadler and Waldorf. Very Stadler and Waldorf. Those two old farts are. Even though they're just Ford and sympathy. Like they're just right in that Ford. That's all they're doing. Yeah. They suck.
I like Roussant ending up being the guy in the church that purifies things.
Yes,
like after he kind of has his fall from grace, and after the Rella like reveal, the Rella reveal to like Rella dying happens so quickly.
It does.
It's like, wow,
because there's not even a dungeon to get to Rella. It's just straight up going into the fight.
Okay, here's the like. Playing through it on New Game Plus, where I'm skipping through a lot of the scenes and stuff like that, it probably was 5 minutes between her, like, between you finding out that she's the one who murdered or who cursed the prince, and you fighting her and her turning into a big block of ice. It's like you can go through that real quick if you're not actually watching the 30 minutes of cutscene there.
It is crazy, and then it goes from that you broke the curse, cool, to just the escalation that can happen there is if you're skipping things, if you're not doing side stuff, you're just going through this main story beats. You go from point A to B to C very quickly. Yeah. It's insane. But also Rella, I love Rella's character. She is such a like deeply sympathetic character. Once again, showing us like she tries to pull the I'm evil thing, but once again, they do such a great job of being like, hey, this person's pretending to be evil, but you know them and you know they're not evil. Yeah. Whereas Forden is like, I think Forden might be good. It's like, no, Forden's evil. Forden's real evil. Yeah. Is Luis good? No. We're going to keep on reiterating and telling you, even though Luis is innocent of the crime he was, of the crime of what you thought he was.
Yeah, that you believed.
It turns out not like, oh, the prince is still alive. I'm going to kill him now. Like, oh, you weren't the original assassin, but you definitely see the prince as a problem in your way, and you're going to kill him anyway. Yeah. Like you would have happily been the assassin of the prince. Like that's kind of thing, to the point where
you're just mad somebody else beat you to it.
Pretty much. Like to the point where like he studied the curse to better understand it, and that. But also shout out to him. This is also another fun point is when you talk to the elder Elda. That's a weird term. I just realized elder Elda. When you talk to her, she mentions when you bring up like Luis. Yeah. And she brings up like
he'd been there.
Yeah, he'd been there. And she goes, well, how would he know? And they're like, well, I mean, describe him to me. And it's like, well, he sounds like there was a family of doctors before we got assaulted by the church. And then that leads into like, I will say this is.
I mean, like his whole thing of like he was really turned when the church came and burnt down the village, and that was like his turning point where he said, "Fuck it, I'm going to burn this world down."
Yeah,
like they burned my world down. Is like it is very much like they're like
the king who I trusted
could have been and is for bits of this story it is the enemy of my enemy is my friend. So like he's okay with you aligning yourself with him because you're all against Forden or something like that.
Even though that's like your ruse to get close to him so you can assassinate him. I want to get to that assassination in just a moment, but I want to say the fact that it's also doubled up on the fact that Luis was inspired by the king in his youth. He has a copy of his book. Yeah. It's the only two copies that are in the game. And yours turns out to be like a magical version of it. His is just a legit book, which means he believed in this as a child, and then like the king inadvertently like wasn't able to stop the church from murdering his wife or like his lover and the Elden Sanctuary. And so Luis is just like, oh, every time he's talked about how ineffectual the king is, he's built it up like talking about like the masses. But in reality, he's talking about this isolated thing that happened to him.
Yeah.
The king couldn't help his lover. He couldn't help his son. And he fucked over the Eldas.
And the king used to have these ideals, but they were eaten away by time because of his ineffectiveness against the church and the other power structure at play.
So, and even then his assassination of the king is less of a, like, because the way they presented in the opening video is it's presented very much as like an egotistical thing, only for you to realize he's giving a revenge speech to the king. He is straight up saying, like, I'm doing this out of revenge. We just don't have the context for it. And it's really fucking cool and smart. And then his reveal to the king's Malga ghost, where he takes off the horns and the king realizes who he is. And it's like, and that's why the king gets like really super depressed, because he goes, oh, I caused this too. Like, also the sins of the father being visited upon the son, another theme. Shout out to also one of the humans being clearly a Garden of Eden reference with the apples.
The first one in the opening fort, but plus you also fight, a bunch of them at the end too.
Yeah, that's such a cool like.
I mean, that first one is like, oh, yep, we're in for like very on theme Persona, style boss fights and stuff like that.
And
I
then
appreciate we didn't have any giant dick monsters or anything like that from like Persona 5. But
if you think about it, Forden is the giant dick monster.
Sure, yeah. And I guess the thing that was corrupting the dragon god, when you go and fight him on the
he's a little
island,
phallic.
He's phallic in that like he's got the very
dome.
bulbous,
I guess you could say
head.
What are they called? The three-eyed people. Their tribe.
The Mustari, I believe.
Yeah, Mustari. Mustari's helmets in general are very phallic as well.
Sure. Yeah.
Very domed.
Some of them are. Some of them are
shit.
like the
Yufa's is straight up. Yufa's straight up a penis head.
Yeah, Yufa's. But like the first one you see her brother, and the one you see before you really go to that island is like
box,
a rook piece or something, like a chess piece kind of thing. It's like, all right, that's
what I was expecting.
That's a weird looking penis.
Yeah. Well, for me that was like, I'm like, oh, it's like architecture, like chess piece is cool, and then you go to the island, and I'm like, there's a whole lot of dicks.
And then like a lot of the other ones that you see, like the ones you can like talk to people and get your tolerance score up or something like that, are like, oh, there's like it's a box or some kind of like they're not all as curved as Yufa's are. Maybe it's a gendered thing of like, oh,
all the women have penis helmets.
More like the women have more curves to them versus the men that are more straight, linear, more trucky bullshit.
Yeah. I do want to say Etria, which is the like. Also, shout out to them being like, we're gonna play with like language here. We've never called our home anything other than our home. We're gonna call it Etria, and I'm like, that's cool as hell.
Yeah.
But there's a scene there if you want to do it to expand your imagination. At night there on the beach, that is such a beautiful scene. I actually teared up a little bit. And like the music hits at just the right moment as the like star showers happening, and I'm like holy shit. HDR is on for my little screen I'm on at my parents' house, playing it on like bright color, like all the colors I'm seeing, and I'm like, this is art. I'm being moved. This was a thing I did. Also, it gave me crazy imagination. There is no good balance. It's either you get like a bajillion points for your stat boost, or you get like 3 or 4. Yeah. Like there's no in between. It is just like massive or little. You
get, if like reading the books and stuff, you get like 6 usually, like 4
to 6, and then like if you finish the book, you get double.
Yeah, you get,
and which is where it's at though.
Yeah.
Also, shout out to them having like very different kinds of books this time around. Like. It was not like, I think I've been accustomed to like generic either textbooks or like novels.
Did you get the hidden one?
What's the hidden one? I don't know.
So there's one that you like most of them you'll get just over the course of the game. When new people come in, you'll get like a little thing saying like, oh, so and so must have brought this book and added it to your library. There's one in the third town you go to, Brylehaven, that you can, if you talk to one of the like other candidates, the one like the
I got his book.
One,
the
one
the
he
vegan?
wrote basically.
Yeah, the vegan one.
Yeah. That's like the only missable book, but
I got it. I read it. It was good. It boosted your whatever it was. It gave you big boosts on that one.
Yeah.
Also was very fascinating because it's like, oh, this guy has some like really good ideas, but his application and his like, there's no way for you to like he's taking big swings with his book. Like his book is about big swings.
On that, like I was so annoyed in the in the debate stuff.
With him, especially, yes.
No, with all of them,
all
really.
Of them.
Like, all of them, it's like you go in and you do the debate to, like, increase your eloquence or whatever, and also if you're trying to get the trophy, like I did, especially on the second run. I realized on the second playthrough, I only missed one in the first go-around, and it was, like, a midway, it was one I could have gotten. I hadn't missed it in terms of, like, I didn't started this out too. It was one where, like, I missed it because I had gone to a dungeon that was, like, 3 days away, and this one popped up while I was on that road or something.
The one I missed for sure is Jin. Mm-hmm. I might have missed another one as well. I don't know how many there are.
I believe 8.
8? Okay, I definitely need to do 8 of them.
There's 3 in the second town, 4 in Brylehaven, and then 1 in the
I did not do all of them. I will have to do it in New Game Plus.
But it was I got mad because like I would save each time because I knew the trophy, if I was going to get it was well, you have to win the debate. Yeah. And also the like, you're going to get, better benefit if you win versus if you lose. And like each time I wasn't looking at a guide for like which was the right answer. I was just going off of like, well, this feels like the right, push to make. And each time I got it wrong 2 times before I finally picked the right one.
Oh, really?
Like I just kept like attacking the wrong bit of like their argument or whatever with the choice that we're getting. There were 1 or 2 where it was like, okay, well, this is the obvious right answer. But like a couple of them, it was like no, that's based on like the little snippet you gave me. I feel like I did make like I felt like I could have taken that to the cogent argument, but that's not the argument that my character made or something.
Yep.
So I was like annoyed by that.
Or you bring up the obvious argument, like the one with the vegan guy. You bring up the very obvious argument against him. And then immediately,
and everybody turns on you of like, well, how dare you attack him for something like that? And it's like, shut up.
Well, you bring it up and you just kind of lay it out there, and then he's able to turn it on you.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, first off, that happens in debates. Like you see that happen, and it makes sense. It doesn't feel like it's not based off your eloquence score.
Yeah.
So you're not going to, because you're more eloquent, you're not going to have a better variety of options.
Yeah,
you just
got to pick the right answer of the 3 that we've given you. And so like, get it wrong, reload, try another one, get that wrong, reload, try the third time. Yeah. Like, all right, fucking fine. Now I'm saving.
There you go.
So annoying on those things. But even there, like a lot of those viewpoints, fine. Some of them are absolutely terrible. And like, I love like one of the people that you fight on their gauntlet runners, just Roger the Libertarian. I'm like, I'm going to beat the shit out of you.
No government, no taxes.
First thing I'm going to do, steal from you. Then I'm going to beat the shit out of you. And then we're going to call it a day.
Or Captain Medicare.
Yeah, Captain. The super old guy. Yeah.
Like, where's my social security check? Yeah. That guy.
And I love Stroll being like, "We're not trying to kill you. What are you talking about? Like, that's not our goal here."
When he shows up at the end, he's actually like not like he's not as antagonistic. He's still not cool.
Yeah.
But he's not as antagonistic, and you're like, I guess that's the best I'm going to get out of this old piece of shit.
Yeah. Like, you're too old. You're not going to change your ways. Whatever.
Yep.
But yeah, like then there are others where it's like, Loveless is just like, I want, bars to be free everywhere. It's like, cool, but how do you think that's going to actually work?
How are you running the government off of that?
Yeah, the guy who's like, abolish taxes. Like, how do you, taxes are helpful. Like, they do pay for roads and shit.
It is straight up, he's the easiest debate that I ever did, because it's straight up just like, taxes pay for things.
Yeah, yep.
And it's like, how do you dismantle any libertarian's argument? Say taxes pay for things, and then they're going to immediately deviate over to talking about the age of consent. That's how it works in real life.
Sure.
And not in this game, but in real life, that would have been the logical endpoint of that debate.
Yeah.
Luckily, Roger isn't a creep, so he doesn't make that connection.
Lots of just great methodologies, at least like introduced. But again, so much of it, is a little surface level, and only
Sure.
a few of those examples are really going to go too much deeper into into like, okay, here are the real flaws of this perspective, or here are the real benefits of this perspective, or something.
Well, it's like Jin is straight up just scamming people. Like, I'm gonna give you everything you want, and then getting out of town before people realize that he's full of shit.
Yeah.
Like, which
Also,
is also
not great that that he's the Nydia,
Yep.
candidate or whatever.
Yep, sure isn't great.
And
Sure
playing
is
into the same stereotypes as Alonso.
Yep. Except Alonso's doing it for like a Robin Hood-esque like attempt at
Sure,
it, like
yeah.
working to undermine the underworld. Jin is just straight up like just being a modern politician.
Yeah.
I didn't realize you could like. It's like if Ted Cruz
being
cosplays the
grifter,
Penguin.
Sure.
That's what he looks like to me. Is like if Ted Cruz cosplays the Penguin. And I'm talking like clean shaven Ted Cruz, not this Ted Cruz with a beard. Because I don't know, when you support the man who called your wife ugly to America, to all of America, and said she was like mentally unwell.
I feel like attacking somebody because of a beard, not the right call for you or I to make, Cameron.
I was not attacking him because of the beard. I was just trying to make a dig at Ted Cruz in general.
Sure,
but
you made it from the perspective of attacking his beard. It's like,
well, he grew.
Yeah, I mean, he looks like a dumbass. Sure.
Well, he grew the beard
it's more,
after
he's
that.
a fucking dumbass.
He is a dumbass, and he's awful.
Yeah. I'm trying to think other character links. The Brigida stuff is a lot of fun, and
that's so cool.
The turn from going like, all right, you're here to be my secret dog keeper because I'm too hard of a person. I can't have a dog. Nobody can know I have a dog. And then that dog gets kidnapped, and it turns into like a John Wick situation for a little bit. And she's like, I'm going to kill everything that hurt. And you talk her down, but the church still blames it on her anyway. So it's like, all right, well, now I'm going to bring down the church. I'm like, right here with you, sister. Let's do it.
We are past the point of Forden turning out to be an ass. And I am here.
On the New Game Plus playthrough, I cleared out most of her story. Like, there are elements of her story that I clear out before I'm actually a candidate, but there are dialogue in there where it's like I'm referring to myself as a candidate, or she's asking like, why am I being a candidate? It's like, oh, well, that they should have time gated this chunk of the story, but then the end of the story is time gated, and I haven't been able to go back and do that like her last little bit of the story yet.
Which is hiding one of the best fucking classes in the entire goddamn game. Tycoon.
The Tycoon, yeah.
Tycoon's so goddamn good.
Yeah.
Little elephant merchant guy. Fucking love him.
Mm-hmm.
Has one of the funniest abilities, the gold one, where he basically, you hire mercenaries. That whole class, merchant and tycoon, are just,
especially if you
fun.
if you are raking in the cash, like that is easy way to just go through, especially if you combine the tycoon, like a maxed out tycoon, with like a couple of the like purified tycoon weapons or merchant weapons.
Oh,
where
yeah,
it's like, I had misread it initially, and so I wasn't using the weapon because it was like there's a weapon you get earlier on that's like decrease the cost and attack of your merchant abilities, but then there's one you get later that's just decrease the cost.
Yes.
Attack stays the same. So now instead of spending 3,500 reeve to do a shit ton of damage, I'm spending 333 to do a shit ton of damage.
Also, the tycoon gets 2 discount abilities for his abilities.
Yeah.
Which is just insane. Like pocket change doing, like I was doing like 2,500 damage. Mm-hmm. Easy, not even like I was getting like auto crits with it because I also had like a weapon that auto critted for it, and I was running through dungeons doing that. So I was just raking in the cash.
I really started to use him for Basilio, and it was a late game thing because I was like, okay, well, one of the trophies is like use 100,000 worth of merchant abilities or whatever. So I was like, all right, I'm gonna keep doing that, and like realizing, especially if I'm using like the synthesis abilities or something like that, I'm using 15,000 per turn or something like that. So I picked up that trophy pretty quick, but also I was like one-shotting so many hard fights or something like that because of how much damage it was doing.
Yep.
Absolutely love that.
It's crazy how good that class is, and it's like insane. Also, you're beating people to death with a calculator. Your weapon is a fucking abacus, you are just beating people to hell with it. And for some reason, that just tickled my fancy. Also, the fact that you swing it around and then you do like a magic spin attack also with it. I'm like, there's something amazing about this weapon. That I'm like, amazing about this class. Like I am deeply in love with it, for just like all the right reasons. And then at the end game, I forgot I ran into Luis's fight with Tycoon equipped, and I was like,
"Oops!"
I'm like, here's the thing: I know I could easily trounce this fight, but thematically, I don't feel like it's right. So I reloaded my save and then came in as a prince.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. Shout out to that. Just like also, yeah. Great shit. I love it.
Did you max out all of the relationships and stuff?
Yes,
Yeah.
I did that way early too. Like I was not even at the first phase of Luis's thing. Like I automatically was just able to get through all of them. I only had a couple of them with the last couple phases left.
Sorry, I'm saying, did you max out all of the follower links?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
That's what I meant though. Is like
Okay.
I get it done way earlier too than like
yeah.
the end game.
Yeah. Well, for me, it was you get to like the final chunk where it's like, all right, Luis is taking the thing up, or or Luis is up in the city. You need to go, fight him. Here's 30 days to,
Yes.
do everything you need to do. Here's all the, the dragon side quests. Take the time to build up your follower links. Yeah, I had everything, including like all the side quests and stuff done with at least like a week to spare. And I think I mentioned to you, like I would just take that last week and just go to the Coliseum and just do like the run of 30 gold fights.
I never was able to do that last one because I lost the time on it. I was I ran out of time to do it. So I made it to gold 1. But that was like the last day that you could do the Coliseum.
Gotcha.
So I missed out on that. So I'm gonna have to do that again, which is fine. I don't have to do any of the
I mean, yeah, the nice thing of a new game plus is, okay, you don't need to spend any time building up your stats because all the royal stuff is carried over. So you can immediately go into any social link as soon as it's like available and not have to worry about like, is my eloquence at level 3 yet or something like that. So you burn through a lot of those quicker.
I also say I didn't run into the roadblock for a lot of them until Katarina's. I had to be like a level 4 something or level 5 something. And for like the last 4 of hers, which is fine. Like most of the time I was already past that point that it was like the gated requirement for it.
Yeah. The problem is if you don't get like Katarina's like end game benefits are like, she'll join you in combat, like she'll join you in a dungeon basically and does like an extra attack at the beginning of fights, like, and she doesn't do it for every dungeon, but like there's a chance she'll pop up when you go into a dungeon, and it's like,
I didn't really understand why.
Hey, Katarina's here, she is out there doing her thing, but basically like you get your attack on enemies and then she gets an attack on enemies, so like you've severely, weakened and sometimes just taken out, one of the 3 things you're fighting per fight kind of thing. And I finally unlocked that for her my first playthrough with like one. Like she only joined me in like one of the dragon towers. Basically, is she like the actual tangible benefit I had with her in the first game round.
Two dragon towers for me, the last 2, and then that was it. Like. Yeah. Honestly,
so it's more like on my new game plus. Oh, I've got her like much quicker now, so she was there for like all of the little side things I did in Altaberry and will be popping up in more. So it's that kind of thing of like, oh, I finished your stuff in my first time around way too late for you to really be of any benefit.
Yeah.
Whereas like with Brigida, like I unlocked her like sending the care package thing before I even left Grand Tran in my new game plus.
Nice.
So every couple days she's sending me like 50,000 Reeve, and I'm like, cool, I'm gonna get that the entire game from her. Same with Barden's like little care package that he sends. Yep. So yeah, like getting those much quicker this time around means, okay, I'm getting a way bigger benefit of those this time around. So, but yeah, like I enjoyed a lot of those, like the little tangible and like extraneous little benefits you get from the story things. But yeah, the real bread and butter is for so many of them is like, unlocking like all those classes. Did you unlock and master do enough archetype stuff to get the Revenant crown in your playthrough?
Yes, I did.
Okay, yeah, that's a nice little boon of like, this gives you 1 extra turn per turn, or one extra turn icon per turn. I did not get that my first time around. I capped out at like 76 or something %, but I've got it now in my new game plus because so many of those came in unlocked and mastered. So that's been nice. But yeah, In terms of combat stuff, any things you want to really particularly call out combat wise in our spoiler?
Well, there's a couple of other character things I want to mention.
Oh, sure.
Hulkenberg, I think, is like a very interesting character in that she is kind of like a redeeming knight. I thought, especially because she spends so much time talking about the prince, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, you are the prince. Mm-hmm. It's such a weird, like, fun dynamic twist to it that I felt was very good. Especially her being like a wandering knight after the prince's disappearance / death.
Yeah, for me, like, hers, I guess, didn't hit so much for me, but it's largely because, like, I was always like, hey, you did nothing wrong. Like, and I was always coming. So, but like, she's very much struggling with, she can't hear that. Yeah. Like that, like, she's not, she can't believe that because she has put too much pressure on herself and all this stuff. And so it was kind of like, I just felt like I was repeating the same things to her over and over again. And finally it sinks in, but, and also like her little antagonist in her story is just so immediately and, undeniably a bad guy that's like, yeah, fuck that guy. Like from the jump, he's out there hanging people without, any kind of due process or anything like that. Of course I'm going to help you, kill him or do whatever we need to do to take this guy out. Because fuck this guy. I don't care that he was your rival and you feel this thing of like you were a Nepo baby and whatever. Like, it's like, no, you've more than proven yourself like competent.
So many times.
Fuck this guy. Like,
yep.
This guy has nothing apart from like whatever his nepo-ness is at this point. So, yeah, fuck that guy.
Basilio's another one that I really. Basilio and Fidelio are.
Yeah, I love their story.
It's awesome.
The tragedy of Fidelio. Like I love their relationship with Juna.
Because Fidelio's straight up in love with Juna.
Yeah.
Which is but also their dream of opening up a diner and Fidelio singing, and maybe they have Juna show up every once in a while. Like, yeah. I'm like, I want to see that. I want that at the end, and you don't get it.
Nope,
it's really fucking sad.
You get the really, a big old scorch mark hole in Fidelio's chest. That was when we recorded last week. You were like, I've unlocked everything but my last character, and I don't know who my last character is going to be. And I'm sitting here being like, it's going to be Basilio, but I'm not going to tell you how or why.
I figured it was probably going to be Basilio because he's the only other character with an external
has
weapon.
Like a weapon running around.
Yeah. He's the only other character who just shows up with a weapon on him, and I'm like, well, if it's Fidelio, what's his backpack? Is his weapon?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I wouldn't put it past Team Zero.
Maybe he's a caster. Who knows?
Yeah, like, and he is actually, because when you see him like actually in gameplay wise, like not gameplay wise, but when you see him like actually like do stuff.
I mean, yeah, he puts up a shield in his death scene. He's got a big old shield.
He straight up the shield to the axe of his brother. Like, he's very much the defensive one, and it makes sense. Like, and I get that. I love that about him. I love that he's like, he's the little tyke, but he's the older brother. It's the very much like the Minotaur brothers from Final Fantasy VIII. The big one, the big one is the younger one, etc.
Yep.
Then it turns out to be really fucking sad because it turns out it's because of fucking igniter experiments.
Yep.
And you meet their childhood friend who's like a brother to them, who is like straight up serial killer because he's gone insane from the like horrible, horrible pain that he's in.
Yeah.
And he's killing people who are selling like illegal igniters, which like understood, not okay. Like, and like, it's horrible. It's horrible and it's tragic. And it's, that's also where Basilio finds out that like none of outside of him and Del and Varric.
I don't remember the guy's name.
Their friend. Those are the only 3 survivors of the igniter experiments. The rest of them were killed. And because after Fidelio and Del, Fidelio and Basilio, sorry. Basilio, Baz and Del. I'm just going to do what I normally call them. Baz and Del. When they escaped, it caused the church to buckle down on the experiments. And so it's brutal. But it's also, you find out that Baz was in love with Rella because she saved his life. Like these 2 brothers and these 2 sisters. There's like some cross lover like affections.
In another, version of the multiverse, they get a happy ending. But
Yep.
not this one. This one ends up way more tragic.
Yep. So much more tragic.
Yeah. Speaking of that, real quick, obviously we talked a little bit in the last episode about like, the lack of romance options in here. But so, you do get like little scenes where it's like, okay, here's an opportunity to go talk with anybody on the ship that you want to talk to, or here's an opportunity at the beach to go talk to people at the on the Etria Island, and then later on you get like one last like here like who do we want to talk to before we go into the final fray or whatever. Did you have like a canon like this is who I'm quote unquote romancing?
I was a player. I played them both.
You played, how do you mean you played them both? Who's
Yufa
both?
and Juna.
Yufa and Juna? Okay.
Both of them, I like straight up, I love the aspect of like they gave the main character way more personality this time around. Because straight up, one of my favorite scenes in the entire goddamn game is when you are in the like, you're in the Water City, you go to like the club, and Basilio and Del are like chilling, and they're like, so why do you really want to join Luis? And you have an option to be like, I'm really into Lady Juna. And I chose that option, and they straight up be like, we're both like, good luck. and Heisme says, sounds like you both are speaking from experience. And it's like, and Baz like laughs at that, and Del's like, shut up. And it's like, it's very much from the get-go. And then like, there's a scene where it's like, Luis is like, I feel like you want to ask me something. And I'm like, one of them is like, is it true that you and Lady Juna are together? I was like, yes, this is what I'm choosing. And it's like immediately just like, what? Like everyone's like, the fuck? Why are you asking that? And it's like, it's such a great moment of basically there's all of that set up. And then you get to meet Lady Juna, and she joins your party and everything. And then there's a lot of like kind of flirtatious stuff that you can talk to her about. Yeah. And I leaned into that all the time. Now on the flip side of that, you have Yufa, who I said, I'll shake your hand.
Yeah, who immediately is infatuated with you.
Yes. Because you discover her while she's bathing, which is like the most anime shit ever.
Yeah, you can play into that or not, or whatever.
Yep, and 100% played into it, but like, shake your hand, yeah. And she goes, well, you shook my hand.
Oh no, there's, our tribe has two meanings of a handshake. One that is, trust like you, and one that is, and she gets flustered, and you find out much later it's a much more intimate, relationship.
It's like asking somebody to marry you, is you use that handshake. To the point where her brother straight up is like, hey.
Ooh, at the end.
He doesn't, for me, it wasn't that. It was a, hey.
Oh, yeah.
Like, my sister. Like, don't break her heart or I'll break your bones.
Yeah.
Like, total moment for that. And it's like, it's so good. And so, like, at the very end, like, they are both, like, kind of still, like, it's there. And
for me, and this is where, like, I mean,
so there's romance in this game.
Original, and this is where, like, I mentioned last week that, like, or I alluded to the idea, like, if you go through all of Stroll's stuff, you could absolutely lean into a lot of his, I want to be there for you. I'm there with you. It could absolutely be played like
Trevor,
a romantic relationship.
Trevor, ask me the question you want to ask me.
No, I don't.
I did do it. I did play into that as well.
Sure.
My Will was a player. Will is the canon name that I found out about, which is I do this for all the Persona games and everything. I try to find the canon name and play it with that. Other people use their own name, and I think that's totally fine.
Well, I mentioned I played my first run as Tyson.
That's right.
My D&D character. The second one, knowing the themes of the game, I've named him Populi.
Ooh, that's good.
Yeah, I know, right?
That's really good. Turns out his canon name is Will.
That's lame, but I mean, I guess I get it. Anyway.
Well, if you think about like the character that you're popping out is like your Will, the prince's Will.
The prince, yeah.
Yeah.
That's another thing there is like we never get the prince's name, do we?
So in a lot of cultures, royalty, like they don't technically have a name.
Yeah, I mean like the king here is like Hithadelius or whatever, the fifth. And it's like, okay, so I guess like once the prince, assumes his throne, he would get his title or whatever. Yeah. And he's just the prince till then. But yeah, it was still like that's a weird, especially like because that's the thing I started thinking to myself of like, well, where did my character's name come from compared to the prince's name if I am the prince? Like, why do we not share the name? And obviously we don't share a name because that would have given the game away for everybody. If I introduce myself as the Elda blah blah blah, and then they're like, that's the prince's name.
Yep.
So I get why it's not there, but it was those are the kinds of things that were going through my head once that like twist happens in the reveal.
When everything kind of fell into it for me, I also had that same thought, and then everything kind of fell into place when you find out more is Hythlodaeus.
Yeah,
and it's like, oh, Hythlodaeus V. That's the name he assumed when he took the throne.
Yeah.
And it makes sense that like, oh, nobody knows.
He's a pope, but like, oh, we know the pope's real names, but like, especially if you go back in time, oh, the common folk didn't know the pope's name before they were Pope John whatever the third.
And it's like that with a lot of royalty too, like especially in like the Holy Roman Empire.
Sure.
You have all of those like. When you take a position, oftentimes you take up a new name.
Anyway, I don't really care too much about
I
this.
loved it. I thought that was great.
Back to the romance side of things. I do think that there is like, I think there could have been fun there with like, especially given how the story is going to play out, like who is your queen in this, in this New World Order kind of thing.
I got burnt really badly from Unicorn Overlord, so I was okay not doing that.
For my initial playthrough, I hung out with Fidelio on the ship when it's like after the Kraken attack thing, and you get like that first thing as like a hey, I want to hang out, and this is like a peace treaty kind of thing.
I want to hang out with the brothers. Yeah, I was like, oh, the brothers are coming along. I want to spend as much time with them as possible.
Yeah, second time through my New Game Plus, I think I chose Juna instead. The reward you get for that one is the same for everybody. Like you get a different item, but
it's the plus 4
always
stat
a stats like all stats plus 5 is the benefit. Then later on the beach, my first time around, I sort of did what you're doing. I did Juna in my first playthrough, and then I'm doing Yufa in my new playthrough. Largely influenced by having done the Yufa and knowing the Yufa storyline, it was like I wanna see how Yufa reacts on these things. I love like if you hang out with Yufa on the beach at the big like send off festival thing, she gets flustered and apologizes, runs away, comes back with her helmet on. Because Juna had told her that like she had a smile that would knock you out kind of thing, and she took it very literally and was afraid that she was going to knock you out with her smile. And you kind of get this moment to like explain like, oh no, that's just a turn of phrase, it's an idiom kind of thing.
That's awesome.
But it plays into so much of like the joy of like helping introduce her to the broader world because she's been such a sheltered, cloistered character.
Sorry, some of the best people in the game, but they're so isolated from everybody else that they have this negative. Like it's not even that they are like they're pagans for sure, but they're not seen as like necessarily as antagonistic as some of the other races. And it's just because of like representational issues. It's like with the Elda.
Yeah,
there's more Mustari than Elda out there for people to know. So it's not as rare, but it still is kind of like that individual kind of quote unquote model minority. Like this is the aspect that you associate with Mustari, which is they're weird and they are pagans. That's what people know about them. And when you get to their homeland, they're still really weird and they're still pagans, but they're also really nice people also, outside of wanting to send a woman off to her death. But that's only some of them. You find out that's some of them.
Yeah, that
deconstruction of like the savage tribe, by the way, was a great thing that they did with this too.
Absolutely,
yeah. Deconstruction of it was awesome.
We talked about that real quick. Tangent over into Music Land. The music on the Etria Island is one of my favorite beats in the show that I mentioned. Like has kind of the Polynesian Islander kind of vibes to it, and so it just does sound different than the more monastic chanting that we get in so many other chunks of the game and stuff like that. So I was that's one of the few highlights that I think really connected for me in terms of the soundtrack. I like both of their characters, and so I was like, if this game did have a romance, I would have been very curious to see what that like extra little scene would have been at the end. But it is fun to just kind of play into like, what your personal relationships with these characters are. And then
it's also kind of like a fun thing where it's like you're the idealized version of the prince, and so the prince has always kind of been like, I really want to be kind of like a flirty guy. Like I've always wanted to be like the flirty hot guy.
Sure.
And I'm like, there's something about that, like this little kid wish fulfillment.
If you're playing that way.
Yeah. And I'm like, I love that. I love that aspect of it. I'm like, this is cool. This is fun.
Yeah.
Getting to really define your character, define your protagonist is a very fun thing that it's not like a very big customization thing or anything, but for them to kind of like go out of their way to make it different, a different kind of protagonist. It's not so much as this is you, this is a character in the story that you are helping along. You are, as the true seeker, you're helping this character through their story. Like there's an aspect of that I really, really love.
Yeah. Any other character bits to call out?
There are, but I think we've definitely gone long enough. I think we hit a lot of the highlight. I guess this is also kind of a story beat. I want to talk about Luis, the assassination at the Opera House.
Sure.
Potentially the coolest fucking part of the game is that entire scene of the, like you mentioned the Final Fantasy VI reference to it. Like it's at an opera house. It's a great comparison. If you get Trevor comparing the opera house scene for Final Fantasy VI to something in your video game, you're doing it right. And they fucking nail it. I love the infiltration of the opera house, going through the back, like having to make your way through to get access to the back end of it, climbing through, and then just straight up like I expected to go wrong. I just expected something to go wrong, and then it fucking does it. You fucking nail his ass with it.
Yeah, there was a moment like when you're standing there on the chandelier and you've got eyes on Luis. I'm like, oh, that is way further away than I thought we were gonna do. So yeah, I fully expect this to miss. But then there's also, you see like what ends up being Zorba in like the shadows on the side. I'm like, who the fuck's that guy? What's going on there?
Why is he highlighted? Why is he not faded into the background?
Yeah.
Why is he so distinct?
Is he a body double? Because that's what's going through my mind when Luis shows up after having like, oh, we did hit him. Like we see the thing hit him, but we don't know if it killed him because it takes him off. But then Luis pops up there. I'm like, did we kill a body double? And Luis was fearing and was on the side,
but then he moves his garb and you see he's just bleeding profusely up his side.
So it's like, okay, so he's not a body double, but still, who the fuck was that guy?
Who was that guy?
And then we get the payoff that it was Zorba. But I'm still like, how the fuck is Zorba back? like we killed him like 50 hours ago at this point.
We
what the hell?
did, but then he awoke his Mustari eye. Like he like the whole like the potential that hybrid people have biologically, like if you are a Mustari with a third eye,
it's also like we don't like we fight him and then he falls off a big thing. We don't actually see him die, so it's like, all right, they did a little
we see his body land. It's a big thing.
We see his body land after after his second form battle on the
oh, you're right. Sorry, I'm conflating the two. You're right.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
Like he falls off, and he falls off in tandem with. He used his necromantic abilities to bring back the dead human that Luis brought into town. So like it was something I was extra, mindful of paying attention to on the second time.
The second time, and they're like, no, for real, we really killed him off this time.
It is like, we don't see his end there, so that when he does come back, it's like, okay, he Back to the Future 2's it. He jumped off and landed on DeLorean, and then just didn't come up and like he knocked us out with the necromantic baby, or not baby, necromantic human, compared to the door of a DeLorean.
Something like that, it's done very, very brilliantly. Zorba being like, you're like, at first I'm like, who's this evil secret sanctum person? And it's like, oh no, it's just Zorba. Zorba's back.
Yep.
And it's like, now he has his third eye open, and also we don't know at the time he's been humanified.
Yeah, I like that you, if you catch it, he's talking to Forden and
reveals you.
And he doesn't reveal he Zorba talking to Forden like he was the one who examined Luis's body, and you can hear him while he's still fully cloaked and stuff. We don't realize, or he's not revealed to be Zorba until later, but like you hear Zorba's voice being the one. Yes, I checked his body 3 times. He's dead, lying straight to Forden's face,
knowing that the heart wasn't actually pierced. Brilliantly done. Luis's entire gambit to expose Forden as the actual perpetrator of the prince's assassination. All of that.
Lots of intrigue in that whole sequence of and I love that like the populace are very confused after the fact, and you can hear like dialogue from like the citizenry of being like, wait, Luis killed Forden. I thought Luis was the one who died. And so that. Like,
the duel with Luis on the opera house is like fucking epic. It's so cool. You don't like it's such a cool thing because he's wounded, bleeding out his side, and he's still like a badass, and
Yeah.
it's a fun fight. I will say all of Luis's fights are fun.
I forget when it happened in the timeline of like us recording stuff on that, but like I got to that fight right before you showed up to record one of our podcasts at one point. I basically had to mute my TV so that you didn't hear the dialogue that was happening as I was about to go into that fight. And it was like, okay, well, that's a cool thing I'm going to get to go back to.
Yep. It was that the entire sequence is the entire opera house sequence, because you're like, oh, we're just going to do another exhibition. It's like, no. They did such an amazing job of being like, the competition, yeah. And it's like, no. It's never been about the competition.
Yeah.
It's always been about this relic, and it's always been like the play, the layers, the planning. It's like executed perfectly. It is so damn good. But also,
we've got our fake, but who's got the real fake? Which is the fake and which is the real one? Yeah.
Oh, straight up though, him being like, I can't believe you made a fake. Like, that wasn't part of his plan. Mm-hmm. His plan was to get it from you, and then that was it. And he goes, but then you tried to, like, there's just this level.
But you tried to kill me. Why are you so insistent on killing me? What's going on here? Like, what is the thing I don't know about you? You've been such a non-entity to me. So what is your real deal? I love Lewis kind of having that machinations.
Well, it's also like you have been distinctly different than every other candidate for this in this competition. You have been you're not a sycophant.
And all along you've wanted to kill me? Like, what did I do to you?
What?
Like he's very M. Bison, like, I met you and it was a Tuesday. What do you like? What's your deal? And then the real him being like, oh, you think I cursed the prince? Well, go ahead and take a look. Did it do anything? Like, because he knows that he didn't curse the prince.
Yeah. He says he goes, oh, because I had because you found.
Oh, you're the one who broke in and stole the formula, or you rifled around the formula. Okay.
Oh, so you think I had something to do with it because you found proof of the formula?
Yeah.
Interesting. Like, he never reveals that it's not necessarily him.
Yeah, exactly.
He plays so coy, and it ties in directly to his like Elda heritage too. Mm-hmm. Where and this is also another thing. He grew up in the Elda village. He should know who your character, like, that's another thing too. He doesn't know who you are.
Yeah.
Cuz you're like, he's been away from the Elda village for a long time.
Uh-huh. And then right after this, and after like all this stuff, and Rella gets, moved up, you come out and you announce that I'm the prince, and he's like, oh, that's how you're gonna play this now.
Yeah,
like I like
there's just the level of rivalry and
even
respect.
there the layers of like, I know you're not the prince, because we all know that the prince is still in a coma because you haven't reversed the curse.
You were trying to kill me.
That killing me was going to pull the prince out of a coma, but he's still in a coma. So now you're saying you're the prince. Fascinating. But yeah, I know the Elda. I know the prince. I don't know you. What's your deal?
Yep. It plays into it, and it's just such a...
But he lets you play along with that ruse.
He lets you play along with that ruse, but also on top of it, there's something about your relationship with Luis that is adversarial, not necessarily always antagonistic. Mm-hmm. And it plays between antagonistic and adversarial back and forth. Yeah. So often.
Even taking it to the next step of like, okay, he issues this challenge and like he calls you to meet in Grand Tran, all because he's going to use his distortion of Magla to turn you into a human and terrify the people.
What you don't know is I studied the curse so I could develop this human formula.
Know I can do this. I don't care that you're the prince. If you're the prince or not, I can still do this to you and completely decimate like your standing. I'll say that in terms of like the mechanic stuff. I love the little popular ranking. Although, especially on a replay, and I kind of clocked this the first time around, like, none of these rankings make sense. You're just dropping the note. Like, I just took out somebody on a runner out in the middle of nowhere. How did my rank just increase or, drop down, by 50,
Listen.
How did I just move up in the rankings 50 people? Nobody knows that I just took out this guy.
It's the fucking Persona 5 popularity meter all over again.
Yeah,
it doesn't make any goddamn sense, and it doesn't matter.
But I love that,
it's
get
a narrative
all the way
mechanic,
up to 2,
and
then they turn you into human, and you just see it plummet scene after scene, and suddenly it's like, all right, now we're climbing up from nothing again.
But because I had completed some of the follower links, it wasn't dropping. It was doing it like it was going to drop, but then it wouldn't, and then it would get.
No, it still drops.
Does it still drop?
It's you run into that where like.
Oh yeah, that's why I'm getting confused on.
Yeah, it's I've finished something. and it doesn't go higher because you've already reached like the cap that you can be at that story point. But yeah, once
and then
like, after he turns into a human and everybody
boop.
sees you turn into a human, he's like, "Oh fuck this!" like
and word spreads
I go
everywhere.
From number 2 to I'm like number 70 or something like this, or number 570, or
like 1700,
number 1,000 or something like
It gets really like you get really further down there, not to your initial ranking where you were like dead last out of any possible candidate for the throne.
Sure.
But like they do such a great job of like doing that and building about like, oh, you're building a community, you're building an effort, you're building a movement through your efforts. The idea of like, we're going to use this slogan, we'll help anybody. Mm-hmm. And it's like, but then you prove it.
Yeah.
And
it is very much like, local politics. Hey, go door to door, help these people, and that will have, results.
You have straight up like the Maria follower link is about building a like fucking community kitchen. Mm-hmm. And like, hey, we don't need the government. We don't need the higher ups to help it. We just need to help each other. That is such an important message. And it's definitely done so well. And it's beautiful in a lot of ways because it's Maria trying to find where she belongs in this world without her parents. And she knows she belongs with her stepmom, but like, where do they belong? Like, what is their community? Putting up the sign made me cry. I cried when that happened because it's the little it's everybody together, and it's like it made me cry. I'm in tears. I'm like, oh my god, like it's
like in that Kingdom Hearts drawing on the wall art style kind of vibe. Yeah,
it hits it. It's like little kid as an uncle.
Sure,
that hit me so hard because I have numerous terrible drawings of me and my nieces and nephews that they've drawn of me as like a stick figure. Except I'm never a stick figure. I'm always an oval.
I think one of the biggest like drawbacks of this game is that it has they took the approach of the old like Persona, like the base Persona 5, Persona 4 of like they only give you a voiced opening and closing scene of their links.
That is a major issue with this game.
So I was like, while I'm reading all these other things in the characters, I don't have as much connection to them because you didn't have as much like you didn't bother bringing in these performers to read out these extra lines. So like it was a disappointment of like, hey, like this is where I sure they're not the team that did Persona 5 Royal or whatever, but they're the team that did Persona 4 Golden. And so like I think it's entirely possible that they will do
they're not
metaphor
the team that did
ReFantazio.
Golden. They did base Persona 4. When they were making Catherine, Golden was being made by the team that is now running Persona.
I still think some fucking team's going to make
deluxe
version of
we need a voice pack
that is those extra scenes and stuff.
The writing is so goddamn great.
Yeah.
And the fact that these aren't voiced lines, like these are like borderline end major character beat moment sequences, and they're not being voiced. And I'm kind of pissed by that because I'm like, these performers are already top notch. None of these are none of these are the like extremely popular voice actors.
Yeah, I didn't recognize any of the names.
Didn't know any of the names, and I was really surprised. I was like, am I going to see a name I even can point out to? And no, I love that because I felt everybody nailed their part. I did not feel like anybody's voice was bad at any moment. I never felt anybody was over the top. I always felt it was pitch perfect the entire way through. The fact that I didn't get more voiced lines for some of these really beautifully written lines breaks my heart. I almost gave it a 9 out of 10 because of that. Like multiple times today as I was playing through it and like these like end game moments where like these should be voiced.
Yeah.
These are incredible major moments that should be voiced.
Like you're giving us these little epilogue scenes. Give us the voices of these characters. That's a big like disappointment in terms of like production. That is an old school production decision that they made that I'm like, that's not what you should be doing here in 2024.
It's 2024. I know you guys are using an old ass engine, but fucking put more voice lines in.
Especially factoring in that like each of these social links only had 8 scenes compared to 10 that we usually get in like the Persona things. That was another thing of like, oh, you've also condensed the stories that you're giving us for each of these characters.
Also, I also want to point out like an interesting thing as well is this is also one of the first times where classes that are based around it, like because before it was like a persona you can swap in different personas and everything. This is the first one where I felt like some major classes didn't have party representation. Primarily healer and mage. Mm-hmm. There's no royal mage and there's no royal healer, which I found interesting. Or royal merchant tycoon.
Yeah.
Or royal like there's
Yeah.
several of these that don't have a royal version, and I was like, okay, I get it, because they're also weird. Weirdly, like, kind of set up. Some of them are like, I'm gonna shout out. I told you last night, Heisme is fucking bullshit to get to his royal version.
I mean, yeah, the royal versions are just the royal versions of the character classes. So yeah, if the class is one of your followers that isn't actually a competitor, they don't have the prince equivalent class. Yeah, the royal archetype associated with them.
Yeah.
I was more like, oh, it's weird that like the knight has 2 elite archetypes, or the mage has 2 elite archetypes, versus like some that don't even have an elite archetype. They only have like the adept archetype or whatever, the second level. I was like, it is a weird grab bag in terms of those, but at the same time, I was like, there are also areas where it's like, oh, you didn't need more than this, or there are some where it's like you have 3, and I don't think you really needed 3.
No, a great example of that, I think, is I think it's the 4 for knight. Mm-hmm. Did you need 4 for knights? 3 for knights makes sense because it's a base one, but it's mage I get because it doesn't have a royal one.
As a sucker for Final Fantasy IV, I appreciate that Paladin and Dark Knight were the 2
I dug that.
true elites of the knight.
I just don't know why you needed a royal knight as well then.
And I think in terms of like mechanically, I like
also Royal Knight doesn't work like Paladin or Dark Knight do. It's like a continuation of the base Knight class.
It's a evolution of the Magic Knight. Yeah.
Not even the Magic Knight. Because they don't even have some of the Magic Knight features to it. It's just straight up like the next version of a knight.
I mean, well, I think there's an element there that I didn't necessarily vibe with in terms of like, oh, when I go from a knight to a Magic Knight, I don't get all of the things that I had as a knight carrying over. I get a couple things maybe that carry over into Magic Knight or into Dark Knight or Paladin or whatever. Like I'm always going to have that, let me go ahead and be the tip of the spear, like draw
the tank maneuver,
the tank maneuver, draw all the attacks. But like I didn't like that, like, oh, you have to, if you want to carry over some of those other abilities, you just need to use your expended inherited slots to properly bring them over. I was like, that's a vibe I don't particularly like, but at the same time, like,
I appreciate that you don't have to lose abilities either, though. Like in like Persona, you like, okay, well, I want to take on this ability. Which ability are you going to forget?
Yeah, sure, that's true.
So there's none of that, which I appreciate. You can mix and match depending on what you need.
And so I was gonna say for the Paladin versus Dark Knight, I appreciated that they kind of leaned into those different archetypes that you have from a Final Fantasy thing of like, okay, the Dark Knight is kind of like hurt yourself to do extra damage or to do like more boost damage kind of stuff, and the Paladin was one that I tried to get so many of my characters to maximize because it's like it's the one that gives you Revitalize 3, which is like you'll get the highest amount of MP back per turn kind of thing, and so that was like once I unlocked that was always in the rotation of inherited wherever I moved people to.
It's so goddamn good.
Because MP is such a vital resource in the game for combat and stuff.
They did not take Persona 5 Royale's cues on it. They are back to the OG Persona game of like, MP is a valuable resource. Use it at your own risk.
Yeah. The thing that really drove me nuts on that was that like stores never had any kind of like the stores that have like an MP restoring thing, it's like a limited one time only, like, oh, they have 3 that you can buy that will give you 30 MP. And once you buy them, that store is out of stock on that the rest of the game. Mm-hmm. Like if it had been like a once a week, the store is replenished or something like that. And yeah, I'm still going to have to go to that town and use like an afternoon turn to go and do that if I want. I would appreciate that so much. That said, I did just do in my New Game Plus, I did like one of like the frost dungeons in the Altaberry area, and it has like a bunch of moth creatures that you can like attack, and they're pretty much always going to be lower level than you or whatever, and you get Magla pills as like a reward from them, and I was like, oh, I did not catch that the first time around.
Nope.
I'm just going to come back here and just cheese the shit out of taking these guys out and just get a shit ton of Magla pills.
That's what I did.
I also have been much more methodical in my New Game Plus in terms of like there's the noodle shop in Atlaberry that you can cook where like two of the options, like one of the options is 200
MP
that gives you 200 MP. One of the options is a thing that restores everybody in your party 100 MP.
Nice.
And then the other one is like, we'll restore any status ailments. I'm like, I don't need that one. but I make a point every day to go to Atlaberry, get that second
I did not know it was a daily thing. I only got it once.
Yeah, it's a daily. It's a daily thing. You can do it once per day, but yeah, you can do it. You can do it on repeat. So that.
Oh, shout out to cooking, by the way.
Yeah, and then fun. I waited to do the cooking until I had all of Maria's stuff built up, because then you get the speed cooking, so you don't lose time when you cook.
Yeah.
And her later one of like you get an extra. So instead of cooking 5 things and getting an extra 1, I will go in and cook 1 per day, get the extra 1 each time. So I'm getting like 2 a day, and just using that for a lot of the MP specific thing. The thing I'm going to once I unlock that I can get the Queen's Honey, every opportunity that I could in my New Game Plus caught as many Lord of the Lake fish that I could.
Nice, okay.
Because I'm going to absolutely spam the sumptuous dessert or whatever that gives you the like, hey, you eat this and you get 4 turns. You get like 4 extra turn icons. I'm just going to spam the shit out of that and eat as many of those as I need to for the secret boss when I end up fighting that in the New Game Plus run that I'm doing.
Shout out to the secret bosses, by the way. Those were fucking awesome.
Because the only 2 trophies I'm missing at this point are 100%ing all the archetype stuff with the protagonist, but like I'm basically just waiting to unlock the rest of them because I probably have more than enough like leafs and stuff to get all those up to full level.
I almost did that in my regular game.
Secret,
secret
boss. Yeah.
If we weren't recording tonight, I would have done that before beating the game.
Sure.
Because the last area you're in, the final like go-to area, has so many spamming, so many like grinding out, like make it easier grinding out.
Oh, yeah. Like running around, like in that last area, I was going around and there's like an area where it's like, oh, there's just a shit ton of the teeth creatures, teeth monsters. And I was thinking back, I was like, I don't think I fought any of these the entire game. I think I was just always killing them in, overworld mode, never really going in. And then I did realize on the New Game Plus, no, I fought probably a couple in like the early dungeons or something.
But they're so low level.
But they were exactly, they were so easy to just like take out while and you're getting either big boosts or benefits, or there is like one fight in the Coliseum that's like you're forced into fighting them. And it's like you have all 5 different types, so you're gonna have to mix and match your weaknesses. And I was like, not if you use the Megiddo or Megidola magic that is the almighty magic, or use your tycoon abilities or whatever.
I'm like, no, it's okay. I'm gonna do the thing where I hire mercenaries to go fight this turn.
Exactly. I'm just gonna take all these guys out in 1 turn. Thank you.
Easy peasy. Or like the almighty slice attack that you get with the prince.
Oh yeah.
Dude,
yeah,
Prince is so fucking good.
Yeah, the Prince is super OP.
It's so good. I love the Prince. Gosh, no, all the royal ones are actually,
especially in the boss rush of the final dungeon of like, okay,
he's so good.
Did you go around and kind of take all of them out?
I did.
Before? Yeah,
I did because I wanted to. You spoiled it for me and told me it makes the last boss easier.
Makes the final boss easier. There is a trophy for basically going straight to the last boss and leaving all of those intact.
Interesting. Good to know.
Big old pain in the ass. And I did it on storyteller mode because I knew it was going to be a big old pain in the ass. Because he basically like ends up like with 8 turns per round. And it when you were playing through it, and this was the thing that I was like, what the fuck does that mean the first time I was doing it? Because I went in and just took all those things out, not knowing it was going to have an impact on the final boss. But like in that final boss fight, you're going to see a lot of like the link has been severed.
That's what I saw a bunch, and I realized what it was.
That's because I took out this other thing. I've taken an ability away from this enemy. With all of them in play, like. Most of those are just crazy. Like a lot of it's like elemental, but it's also like a lot of status effect things. So doing it on storyteller mode, the nice thing about storyteller mode, you can use it for that trophy, not for the optional New Game Plus boss. But if you play in storyteller mode, you can't die. Like you can die, and the game will give you an option of like revive now or restart at a new checkpoint. And if you just select revive now over and over again. You just start right back at that point in the battle with everybody full up, full health, full magic. Which meant a couple times I died at the beginning of his turn because he would do like an attack that killed out my last player, brings me back up, and then his next 7 or because he would sometimes use like the scream attacks that give him extra turn icons. So over the course of his next 7 or 11 attacks, he would kill me again, and I would die like 2 times in one of his attack runs.
So I also cheesed that fight unknowingly because I almost called her Herschel. I'm such an idiot. Hulkenberg. Hulkenberg, I had the equipment and everything set up so that she repelled a lot of attacks, and I also had the ability where if a repel attack happens, their turn's over.
Yep.
So he did a scream. He had like 11 slots up, and he attacks me with just a swipe attack.
Yep.
She repels the physical, and immediately immediately his turn's over.
Yep.
And I'm like, okay.
Yep.
And so like whenever it was like, it's like big scary movement, it's like, yeah, he's gonna do some damage to us, but guess what? Hulkenberg's gonna rebound or repel it and turns over.
Yeah, that was
shout out to like this is why I'm like the Royal Knight is awesome because it does have those abilities.
That happened in the assassination fight with him on my New Game Plus. I had on my character something that basically repelled any physical attacks, and so I did my first round chunk of damage against him. He did one thing that like boosted his stuff, and then he went and attacked me and took the repel damage, and I killed him on the second turn. So I got the unattacked bonus from from him in my New Game Plus run, and that's been a fun thing to have happen.
Yeah, repel works so good, just like it does in Persona. Here, it's like it is ideal. It's so good.
Like shout out to the super like upping the difficulty with the dragon fights. The optional dragon fights,
making them super complicated too, as far as like, okay, how do I beat this one shot? Because like I don't know when he's going to launch it.
Yeah,
and then finally, I this is funny. I didn't have Juna in for the majority of those fights. Mm-hmm. Juna had a fire repel shoe on her.
Oh yeah, and so he's killing you in one turn. Yeah, that was the real. That happened to me too, where I was like,
I realized,
why the fuck is he killing me? Like he's using the auto kill attack after one turn. None of my party have like anything that's repelling anything, and then it was, the people that I have in reserve also need to be, you can't have anything on them, or you'll just do the one shot kill.
I was just referring to the fire breathing, the one that does the fire thing. Mm-hmm. Juna, I put her in and I realized that she was repelling the fire attack back at him, but he was like blocking it because it wasn't affecting him.
Gotcha.
But Juna has the ability to make him weak to fire.
Yeah, that's a tactic for that one of like, if you make him weak to fire, then his attacks will fuck himself up. But I was talking.
That's what I did. Juna was like the solo hero at the end of that fight, just like uninjured, unscarred, unwounded. I'm like, hells yeah.
The one I was talking about was,
I fucking love that aspect of this game.
There is a the final one you fight, I think, either the final or the third one, or I think you said you fought first.
I did.
One of them is like, if you have anything that repels, it will, without fail, use a one-hit kill attack. It will nuke you no matter what.
It was anything that does a stat change for you. For me, that was that one.
I don't,
because I kept getting attacked. I like he limits you to like 300 health.
No, that guy will always limit you to 300 health.
Yeah, that limits you to 300 health. But also he does an auto scream and gets like all these abilities and stuff. If you, I realized, I was like, well, what am I doing wrong? And I looked it up online because I was like, what the hell's the problem with this fight?
Sure.
And it turns out it's like, oh, you probably have auto boosts on for your passives.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, oh, so I went in and I took those off. And then that fight was super easy.
Yeah, I had all of my characters had like fire dodge as like their auto, or like the auto ability I had for those. Yeah. It's definitely like, those were the fights where you have to get the most strategic.
Yes.
Where so many other things, like you can be like, okay, well, I'm not optimally set up for this fight, but I can make my way through it. And then, there are some where it's like, oh, if I don't have like every character here with a cyclo attack or something like that, this is going to take way longer. So let me just go ahead and like reload and do this again with a better build out.
Yep, it's awesome. I found those fights to be so much fun. The very last one, which is like a very epic hard fight.
Yeah.
Where it's just that's awesome as well, but the reward you get is so fucking cool because it's your sword, but like upgraded.
Yeah.
And I love one of the reasons I love that aspect of it is because you find out after it's been upgraded, that it was your mom's sword.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that is so fucking cool. And then if you unlock all of the archetypes on your main character, Moore gives you a sword as well. That's like the best sword in the game. And what's crazy is that means that your dad gives you a sword as well.
Yeah.
And to me, I love that, like the reveal of Hythlodaeus being your father and like being the Moore, tied into the very heavy hints that give that you're the disembodied voice that you're hearing is your mother.
Your mom, yeah.
And then that being confirmed at the end. And like that moment where like the parent, your Will's parent or the protagonist's parents are like Hythlodaeus being like, my son has succeeded me and I'm going to pass on with the woman that I love. Like, how could I be any happier? Like this man whose last like 10 years of his life has been, or like the last 20 years of his life has been hell.
Yeah.
And he does this entire thing to basically make sure that the person who rules is the person that the people want. Like he is at his heart a populist person. And so he's immediately just going to be like, because he knows somebody's going to try to take control. It's likely going to be Forden. So how does he thwart that?
Yeah.
And he does this competition of like, anybody can be king. And it's like, it ties direct because you're like, why is he doing this? And then you realize that he is more. That is he did walk the land. He had this dream of a utopia of like no discrimination, of like people being able to pursue their like what they wanted with like unlimited resources and management. And it's like this beautiful dream. And you realize that his last action with the royal magic is a gamble on to see if somebody who will take up that mantle that he believed in and does. And then at the very end tries to sabotage you because he doesn't want his son to die.
Yeah. And
it's a, like, there's so many beautiful moments in this story that are adult themed, like the idea of legacy.
Shout out to this game doing a much better version, while still also a very fucked up version of the Persona 3 shooting yourself in the head.
Oh, yeah.
To like awaken the archetypes when all the characters like rip their heart out. And then I loved the like final version of that of your protagonist like ripping your heart out in the showdown against Luis, and like
to keep Luis from turning you into a human.
And just seeing the like, oh no, he did it for real this time. Oh fuck.
Because he'd rather remain a person and not be a tool to Luis. Like beautiful moment, and like straight up just like the options you have being like, no, I'm gonna go back and I'm gonna fight. Like like I'm not giving up on my ideals. And it's really this like, it's awesome because it also touches on like a parent will absolutely fuck themselves, like fuck over their own ideals and beliefs if it means keeping their kids safe.
Yeah.
And it just does it so great. It does such a great job. Like, oh, your main character, your protagonist's mom literally gives up her body, like to become a disembodied spirit just to make sure that she can be there to help you along. And then because you're meeting these other people, you're helping them as well. Also, the fact that like archetypes, this magic can be used by anybody.
Yeah.
It just matters if you take it up. Also, shout out, I love that it's a like old school mic. Your heart is an old school mic, and you have to declare, like it's straight up like you shoot yourself in the head, you crush a card, you tear off a mask. It's like, no, I rip out my heart and I declare my like my mantra, my belief, the thing I'm going to live and die for. And Helen passes is so fucking sad.
Yeah.
Because Del shows up and fucking Yufa says it looked like Del's Matra came and joined Baz's.
Yeah.
And it's
his Magla, yeah.
His Magla, sorry. I said Madra, sorry. Yeah, that entire like cried.
Yeah.
As somebody who often cries about like brother stories, like because of like a very difficult history that I have with my own brother, like straight up, this is like hitting all those notes. And the very end of it being like, also shout out to him being like, I want to fucking kill Luis for killing my brother.
Yeah.
That's my sole goal. Him unlocking the fighting, the brawler, pugilist, and martial artist, everything is about how badly he wants to punch Luis in the face. When he unlocks it and he says like, it's like a...
What do you mean? Like he...
Oh, so when you unlock it.
When he unlocks those abilities, okay.
When he unlocks those archetypes.
I guess I never really paid attention to like the dialogue that they're saying when.
Well, maybe because if it was fucking voiced, it'd be better.
Yeah.
Those are other things too. There are really great lines that get lost in there. Shout out to when somebody when Hulkenberg says unlocks the persona master, straight up says I've become like the wild card. Straight up like shouted to persona master.
Yeah, shout out to the persona master stuff and those and the summon master and the summons of the summon master just being personas from
being demons from Shin Megami Tensei and personas.
Like when
different named too. Like
when I cast like Summon Fairy for the first time and saw it was Jack Frost, I was like, hell yeah! Like didn't think I'd pop to see him.
Yeah, and then
building so many other ones like seeing like the Hades one.
Yeah, or whatever. Fairy modified is Black Jack Frost, and it's like you love to see it. It's so, and also his thing is slamming enemies with giant Jack Frost statues.
That's so I will say I dislike the summoner class in that I hate that like her abilities are like you can only use those if you're one of the summoner things. I hate that those aren't things you can inherit it over and carry over into another thing. Like I'd be fine if like I get why I can't carry over the synthesis stuff, fine. But like she becomes just such a worthless character until you build up multiple other things because she doesn't have the real thing that is her bread and butter. Same with the I don't like the persona mask stuff. I don't like that being
the dancer masks.
Yeah, the dancer mask being so locked to that class.
I don't like that. I don't like that she can't. I would have preferred an option where you swap masks as an option because I don't like that you have to. It's out of battle.
Yeah.
I don't like that it takes up an accessory slot.
Yeah.
I don't like that on that aspect as well. I don't like that.
I ended up basically just never using those. I was like, I have better accessories for you. None of these things are helpful. Summoner to demon summoner. The fact that you can't carry those over and it's a brand new slate of them that you have to also unlock as well. Yeah. Pain in the ass. And then none of those fucking carry over to royal summoner. It's all different over there. You also have to level it up again. Yeah. Like, it's bullshit. It's just really bullshit. There's a lot of like not cool things about this. Hyzme literally having to go through like 8 different archetypes to get his royal archetype. Why? Again, like that was not a problem for me because I had already been leveling him up into those other archetypes, so it was no big deal. The one for me was, I wasn't giving Hulkenberg any of those things that she needed of hers, but ultimately it was still fine. Like I was like, okay, I only need to get this thing to level 10 for that one to work. Cool. Level 15 for that one? I will pour over all of the things, all of the leafs that I've been like hoarding onto over the course of the rest of this game. So sure, here we go. So it didn't bother me too much. I ended the game with all of those characters having their royal one fully. Yeah, everyone had their royal archetype to be on theme. I went into the final battle against Luis with all of them, using their royal archetypes. Absolutely, I did the same thing. Yeah. Like that's why I accidentally went in with Tycoon. Yeah, equipped. And I was like, thematically, this just doesn't work for me. Mm-hmm. Even though I have no doubt that this would be an easier fight. Yeah, you could absolutely whoop his ass with Tycoon. Yeah, with my Tycoon, where I was doing like minimum 2,500 on a crit. Like if I wanted to make you weaker, it'd be doing like 5K. Like yeah. Tycoon's fucking. Do you remember what level you ended your characters at? 7, like in the high, like mid 70s range is where I was. Yeah, at. I think my protagonist, I believe, was like 76 when I something like that. The first game. How did you? I'm curious, just how, since the protagonist is the character you can kind of allocate how points are doled out. Did you put your points into anything in particular as like a focus, or did you? I tended to do a more like even spread where I would just kind of let the points build up, and then I'm like, I've got 5. I'll just add 1 to each stat. I always tried to keep my magic and physical the same as much as possible, and then balance the other 3 as much as I could. Gotcha. I'm curious how that. Or I guess I'm curious because it's something I just never paid too much attention to. Are you only seeing the base stats? Because obviously, like whatever archetypes you have can drastically alter those stats, and your equipment. I'm just referring to the base stats. The base stats when you allocate those points. Yeah.
I was doing it purely off of like the base points and trying to keep them equal.
Gotcha.
Because that way, no matter what I switched them to, I would have good magic or good attack. And like allocating the other 3 as they came up, like they kind of evened themselves out anyway.
Yeah.
Agility and endurance were kind of always like at each other's point as well. So if I ever had like if attack and magic were always like at the same, I would then allocate points to the other 3 depending on where they were at. I just tried to keep those bottom 3 as much in line as possible, but primarily focused on attack and magic.
Gotcha.
Heismay, so much agility.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, like all of them are like, oh, their stats you can't change, you can't adjust.
I found out online because I was reading stuff. They're like, yeah, if you like let Heismay just like mess with everybody's accurate, like their hit stat, like he has a thing where as a ninja he can nerf their hit.
Yeah.
And it's like, so basically they have no turn because they can't hit you.
They'll just miss you over and over again.
Yeah. And it's like, and people are like, so yeah, I mained him so much. I was like, I did not as much. I think is also when I went into dungeons and I was like fighting my way through them, I would routinely like start swapping out party members to let them get this like small rejuvenations on their MP.
Yeah, I did not do that too actively.
Yep. So by doing that, I always kept everybody kind of up to snuff on that.
I did it a couple times where like, oh, Stroll's super low on MP, but Hulkenberg's I'll tap in Hulkenberg to to use her. For the go rounds or something.
I used to do it like that, but then I realized if I juggled them more effectively, I would never have anybody get super low on MP except the main character.
Yeah, that's fair. All right. Any final thoughts? We've talked a couple hours here in Spoiler Land. Anything else you want to chat about, or are we good to wrap up?
I think we're good to wrap up. I just think that my final thoughts are, this truly is a phenomenal game. Yeah. I think that this is in a class of its own. Like you mentioned, we have 3 incredible RPGs that came out this year that are all doing turn-based on some level and are all doing it differently. Mm-hmm. We are, I'm trying to remember the term, but it's something of riches.
Embarrassment of riches.
Yeah, we just have an embarrassment of riches when it comes to RPGs this year.
Yeah. And they're also, I mean, like so much of an RPG can be dictated, like the success and the quality can be dictated on your party and how much do you like this party. And I love that in each of those 3 big ones, the parties are just a blast and fun to be around, fun to enjoy. And I think maybe that ties into why I've got Metaphor ReFantazio as like the lowest of those 3, because so much of this stuff isn't voiced. Admittedly, there's a lot of stuff in Like a Dragon that isn't voiced either. But
it's certainly hurt it. It definitely has hurt it. Because the vocal performances in Rebirth are beyond phenomenal.
Yeah.
Red 13's alone is that, going back to code switching, the code switching that happens with Red 13 is mind blowing. It's awesome as hell.
Yeah.
So like, yeah, it's tough. This is going to be I feel like a lot of people are going to be able to like rank it. I don't know where I land on it. I don't know if I want if Rebirth is over Metaphor or Metaphor is over Rebirth. And I think it might be time of day. Like, yeah,
it's going to be like Dragon Age Veilguard obviously comes out this week, and that's going to
be for you. Yeah,
that'll be for me another potential contender. I think that's like the last big one for this year. So
I don't think I have any others.
Going to be looking at like, am I going to try and find some time to go back to Final Fantasy and kind of like reevaluate and recheck that one to see how I like certain elements of that. So it'll be fun when we get to our eventual Game of the Year ranking stuff. So shout out to all of that funness. Well, that is going to do it for this episode of That Nerdy Site Show. Thank you, Cam, for joining me to chat all things Metaphor ReFantazio here. You can follow Cameron at RevCabot, 2 B's and 2 T's. Anything you want to give a shout out to there, Cam?
Yeah, if you came to this and you're like, man, I really want to know what kind of the progress and journey that Cameron and Trevor had while they were playing through Metaphor, go listen to the last 2 weeks' shows. That's kind of like a great, I think, point, especially if you already listened to this episode, really hearing our progress on it. We've both been extremely high on the game since launch, but kind of hearing our progress is I think it would be a very interesting thing if you found this spoiler cast especially interesting.
There you go. You follow me at Trevor J. Starkey. The thing I will shout out, we just wrapped up our annual October foray into Halloween spooky themed That D Plus shows with our 4th annual trip down Treehouse of Horror Lane. This time we did Treehouse of Horrors 10, 11, and 12 from The Simpsons. So you can go check that out from last week. And then this week on that D Plus show, we will be wrapping up the Agatha All Along with kind of our full season thoughts on that, as we have the 2-part finale of Agatha All Along on Wednesday this week. So
we also have our anniversary coming up.
That we do. Yeah. I'm not doing anything special for it. It is completely not on my radar. It's also going to be your birthday.
Yep.
Happy birthday early to you.
That's why I'm like, I always remember when that Nerdy Sight's birthday, we have the same birthday. So
yep, indeed. We have plans for next year's anniversary for Viva Las Vegas for
We do.
2020. So yeah. You can follow all of us over at That Nerdy Site, or go to thatnerdysite.com for all the latest from us. Once again, if you liked what you heard, please remember to rate, review, like, subscribe, share the podcast with your friends, all that fun stuff. Thank you for listening. As always, stay nerdy and be good to each other.